Hello beautiful people. Welcome to Fanfic Universe. In today's episode, we explore, what if the Kyuubi was actually a werewolf deity and Naruto inherited its full ancient power at birth? Hit like, subscribe, and join our community of story lovers. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Boy Who Howled the Night Naruto Uzumaki was born. Every dog in Konoha went silent. Not the usual hush that falls over a village after midnight. This was something older, something that pressed against the eardrums like a held breath. The dogs in the Inuzuka kennel sat perfectly still, ears flat, noses pointed at the sky. Street mutts that normally fought over scraps lay down in the dirt and closed their eyes. Even Kakashi's Ninken, miles away on a mission, stopped mid-stride and looked north. None of them howled. That was the strange part. When something frightened dogs, they made noise. When something commanded their respect, they went quiet. The moon was full that night. It always would be, in the stories people told later. In the Hokage's sealed birthing chamber, Kushina Uzumaki screamed, not from pain, though there was plenty of that, but from something tearing loose inside the seal on her stomach. She felt it go. Felt the chain she'd carried for years snap clean, and then felt something rush into the gap it left, warm and enormous and ancient, like a tide coming in. Minato, I see it. His voice was controlled but his hands were shaking. Golden chains of the Uzumaki's adamantine sealing art spiral from his fingers, catching the edges of what was escaping, trying to contain it, and then he stopped. Because what was escaping wasn't trying to flee. It was leaning forward. In the space between worlds, in the corridor that exists when a seal breaks and a child draws its first breath, Fenraku looked at the newborn Uzumaki and made a decision that would undo 3 centuries of shinobi doctrine. The seal hit the boy's stomach with a sound like a thunderclap felt only in the chest. Every ANBU in the building stumbled. The Hokage, watching from the doorway, put one hand against the wall. And Naruto Uzumaki cried for the first time, a sound so large and so utterly impossible for something that small that the nurses looked at each other and said nothing, because there was nothing appropriate to say. 7 years later, Naruto was running across the rooftops of the Uchiha district at 2 in the morning with a can of orange paint in each hand and what could only be described as the most satisfied expression ever worn by a human child. He landed on a chimney stack with a lightness that made no sense for a 7-year-old, no thump, no scramble, just there and then still, crouched with his heels over the edge and his eyes scanning the street below with pupils that caught the moonlight wrong. Too bright. Too sharp. Like a wolf's. You missed a spot, said the voice in the back of his head. Naruto glanced back at the Uchiha clan symbol he'd painted across the side of their meeting hall, the fan done in brilliant orange with a gold outline, and decided the voice was wrong. He hadn't missed anything. Left side of the fan, Fenraku said. Patient, the way something very old learns to be patient with something very young. The curve. Naruto squinted. He fixed it with 3 quick strokes. The wet paint gleamed. Better, Fenraku said. The sound of sandals on tile came from 3 streets over, moving fast. Naruto tilted his head and heard 2 sets of breathing, one of them the particular rhythm of someone trying to run silently, which most people couldn't do but thought they could. Umbu. Real ones, not the village patrol. Someone had noticed. Naruto pocketed the paint cans, he had very deep pockets because he'd sewn them himself, and was 3 rooftops away before the ANBU rounded the corner. He didn't run scared. He ran like it was a game, and he was winning. The village of Konoha had spent 7 years not knowing what to do with him. The 3rd Hokage knew. Or rather, he knew enough to lose sleep over it, which wasn't the same thing. He'd read Minato's notes, the one sealed in triple-layered jutsu that only a Hokage could open, and he'd sat with those notes for a long time before deciding to say nothing, because some truths, released too early, become kindling. The note said, the seal did not bind Fenraku. Fenraku chose the seal. There is a difference, and I believe it is the difference that matters most. Naruto will not need to fight his tenant. I fear, instead, that they will agree on everything, and the village will not be ready for what that means. What it meant, practically, was a 7-year-old who healed bruised shins in 20 minutes, who could smell a lie before the speaker finished the sentence, who slept 4 hours a night and spent the rest of it on the rooftops because the open air was the only place that felt right, and who had never, not once in 7 years, been afraid of the dark. The villagers, lacking Minato's notes, had arrived at their own explanation: monster. It wasn't fair. Naruto didn't spend energy on fair. He spent it on other things. The incident happened on a Tuesday in September, when the leaves were just starting to go gold at the edges and the air smelled of coming rain. Naruto had been buying ramen. Ichiraku's was the one place in the market that would serve him without making a production of it, and Tucci was a man who decided long ago that a hungry kid was a hungry kid, whatever the village said, when he came out with his bowl and found 3 men waiting on the street outside. He knew them by smell before he saw their faces. Stale sake, old anger, and underneath both, the particular sharp scent of fear dressed up as aggression. He'd learned to identify that combination early. It was the most common thing he encountered. The one in front was a Chunin who'd lost his brother during the Ninetales attack. Naruto knew this because he knew everything about the people who hated him. You learned about your enemies, that was just sense, and he understood, in the detached way of someone who'd been processing adult grief since before he could read, that the man's hatred had a real root. It was just aimed at the wrong place. Setting out late, demon. The man's voice was loud enough that the street around them went carefully quiet. Shopkeepers found things to look at. A woman pulled her child back from the scene without looking at Naruto, which was its own kind of answer. Naruto considered his ramen. It was miso tonight, with extra pork, because Tucci always gave him extra when he thought Naruto looked thin, which was often. He took a deliberate, slow bite. "You're going to want to move," Naruto said pleasantly. The man didn't. He stepped forward. The other 2 spread out to his sides in the unconscious flanking pattern of people who'd done this before, which told Naruto everything about how this had gone for them with other targets, and nothing useful about the current situation, because he wasn't other targets. "Minato's seal is cracking," the man said, lower now, almost triumphant. "Some of us know what you really are. And when the Hokage can't protect you, he doesn't protect me," Naruto said, still working on his ramen. "I'm not something that needs protecting." He said it simply, without heat, and somehow that was worse than any response the man had prepared for. The rehearsed intimidation script had a gap in it suddenly. People who needed to be told they weren't afraid, said it loudly. Naruto said it like he was correcting a factual error. The man grabbed his shoulder. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Naruto put his ramen bowl down on the window ledge beside him with a care that suggested he fully expected to pick it up again. Then he turned, and something behind his eyes that was usually quietly present moved to the surface, and the 3 men felt it before they saw it, a pressure, like standing too close to a very large animal that hadn't decided yet whether to be bothered. His eyes had gone from blue to silver white. Not red. Not monstrous. Moonlit. And his canines, never quite normal even on a regular day, had lengthened just enough to show when he spoke. "I'll say it once," Naruto said. His voice was still conversational. That was the part that would stay with all 3 of them. "Walk away." The man's hand was still on Naruto's shoulder. The man's hand was shaking. The chakra that came off Naruto in that moment wasn't violent. That was the thing the ANBU report would struggle to articulate later. It wasn't aggressive, wasn't a threat display, wasn't the wild red chakra the village had feared for 7 years. It was simply immense, the way the ocean is immense, and standing next to it made you understand very quickly how small you were. The man let go. He stepped back. Then back again. His 2 companions were already moving, and he followed, and none of them ran. Running would have been an admission, but they were gone in 30 seconds, and the street exhaled around them. Naruto picked up his ramen. "You let them leave," Fenraku said. "Obviously." "Why?" Naruto chewed thoughtfully. "Because scaring them was enough. Hurting them wouldn't have been. A pause. The ancient presence in the back of his skull turned this over with the deliberateness of something vast examining something small and finding it, unexpectedly, worth examining. You're smarter than you pretend, Fenraku said finally. I pretend so people underestimate me, Naruto said. He finished his ramen and set the bowl down for Tuchi's assistant to collect. You've known me 7 years. How have you not figured this out? Fenraku made a sound that could have been a laugh, if gods laughed. It was more like the satisfied rumble of distant thunder. I have. I was waiting for you to say it. The academy was the first place Naruto encountered real peers, which was different from encountering kids who'd been told to avoid him, which was what his neighborhood had provided until now. Real peers meant people who'd formed their own opinions, for better and worse, and the academy was exactly complicated enough to interest him. He enrolled at 8, a year late, because the third Hokage had very carefully not reminded anyone to register him on time, and then had looked away in mild embarrassment and allowed the oversight to stand for 1 extra year on the grounds that Naruto was probably already better prepared than most of the incoming class. He wasn't wrong. Naruto showed up on the first day in an orange jacket that he'd bought secondhand and repaired badly but with great personal pride, took a seat in the middle row, and watched. He could hear 32 heartbeats from where he sat. Could pick out which kids had chakra that sang with their nervousness, which ones were putting on bravado, which one, dark-haired, in the front row, posture like a drawn blade, was genuinely, completely calm, with a chakra signature so controlled it almost didn't register. That one was interesting. Naruto had catalogued the entire room by the time Irika-sensei called roll. By the end of the first week, he'd formed firm opinions on 17 of his classmates and mild curiosity about 6 more. The dark-haired boy in the front was Sasuke Uchiha, last of his clan, which Naruto had figured out from the lingering smell of grief and iron discipline that the boy wore like armor. Ino Yamanaka was sharper than she acted. Hinata Hyuga was terrified of everything and had potential so obvious it almost hurt to watch her hide it. He said as much to Fenraku, one night on the academy roof, watching the moon. You're cataloging them like prey, Fenraku said. I'm cataloging them like people, Naruto corrected. If they were prey I wouldn't care about their potential. The moon hung heavy and full above the tree line. Fenraku always grew more present on full moon nights, not dangerously, not in the way the old stories would have you expect, but expansively, like a tide coming in. Naruto's senses sharpened. The silver that lived at the edge of his vision deepened. He could hear the Hokage monument from here, the stone settling in the night cold. The Uchiha boy, Fenraku said. What about him? He's going to be important. Rivals usually are, Naruto said. Fenraku was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, there was something complicated in the ancient voice, something that might have been warning and might have been approval. Don't be gentle with him. Wasn't planning to. The year Naruto was 9, a jonin named Might Guy caught him on top of the academy building doing one-armed push-ups at dawn and sat down cross-legged and watched for 20 minutes without saying anything, which was more restraint than anyone would have expected from that particular jonin. Then he said, "How many have you done?" 1240, Naruto said without breaking rhythm. Which arm? Switched at 600. Guy was quiet for another moment. How long have you been up here? Since midnight. The jonin with the bowl cut and the green spandex and the reputation for exuberance that covered a genuinely brilliant tactical mind looked at this 9-year-old child doing push-ups at dawn on a rooftop, and his expression cycled through several complicated things before settling on something that was equal parts respect and concern. You should sleep, Guy said. I sleep 4 hours, Naruto said. I've already slept. That's not, Guy started, and then stopped, because whatever he'd been about to say about healthy sleep schedules for children hit the reality of what he was looking at and reconsidered. Are you hungry? Yes. There's a ramen place that opens early. Naruto stopped his push-ups, stood up without breathing hard, and said, Ichiraku. I know. He looked at Guy with those unsettlingly silver-lit eyes. You're buying. Guy bought. They ate in comfortable quiet, and afterward Guy said, "Would you like to train with my team sometime?" "No," Naruto said, not unkindly. "Your training methods are designed for people working through human limits. I'm not working through human limits." Guy looked at him for a long, careful moment. "Then what are you working through?" Naruto thought about it. "I'm trying to figure out where the human part ends," he said finally, honestly. "And whether the line moves." He said goodbye and left Guy with the bill and the distinct impression that he had just had a more philosophically significant breakfast than he'd been prepared for. At 10, Naruto began to dream Fenraku's memories. Not often. Not every night. But enough that he started keeping a notebook under his pillow. He'd taught himself to read and write years before the academy bothered with it, and filling it with what he remembered on waking. Mountains that had never had names because no human had seen them yet. Forests so old the trees dreamed. The sound the world made before there were enough people in it to be loud. He saw the other 8 Fenraku called siblings. Vast, slow, immense presences, each with their own sound and color and weight. He saw the moment each became what the shinobi world called a tailed beast, and understood for the first time the scale of what had been lost in the translation. They weren't weapons. They were definitions, of the sea, of fire, of stone and lightning and sand. Fenraku was the definition of the hunt, the moon, the line between civilization and what exists beyond it. He mentioned this to Fenraku, the morning after a particularly vivid dream. "Does it bother you?" the deity asked. "To know what you carry?" Naruto was sitting on the windowsill of his apartment, watching the village wake up. A merchant was opening his stall down below, rolling back the awning with practiced efficiency. A woman walked past with a baby on her back. 2 academy kids ran by arguing about something. The village humming into morning like a machine finding its rhythm. "No," Naruto said. "It would bother me if I had to hide it. Some would say you should. Some say a lot of things." He watched the merchant finish with his awning and start arranging vegetables. "Why did you choose me?" The question had been sitting in him for a year, waiting for the right morning. This felt like the right morning. Fenraku was quiet for long enough that a lesser kid might have thought he wasn't going to answer. Naruto waited. "You learned patience, carrying an ancient deity. It had its own clock. Your father asked me to protect you," Fenraku said at last. "That's what a seal should have done, by his design. Cage me. Use my power as a buffer. Make you a weapon shaped like a boy. And instead I met you." The ancient voice held something in it that resisted translation into human emotional terms, but felt, loosely, like the way the sun feels on your face after a long winter. "You were 30 seconds old and you already had opinions. I could feel them. The outrage at cold air. The affront of bright light. You were furious at the world for being what it was, and absolutely certain you were going to change it." A pause. "I've been around since before your kind could make fire. In all that time, I've never met a soul that's certain before it could even open its eyes." Naruto said nothing. Down below, a kid dropped a coin and it rolled toward the drain, and the kid dove for it with total desperation, and caught it, and pumped his fist. "So you gave me everything," Naruto said. "You were always going to grow into it," Fenraku said. "I just didn't see the point in making you wait." The year things changed was the year Naruto was 11, and Irika-sensei lost his temper. It was midway through the spring semester, a taijutsu assessment day, and the instructor running assessments was a substitute. Irika had been injured in a mission complication, a jonin named Takeda who'd served in the war and wore his opinions about the Nine-Tails attack on his face, not trying to hide them. He'd been making the assessments harder for Naruto all morning. Extra rounds. Dismissive scoring. The kind of subtle sabotage that technically couldn't be reported but everyone in the room could see. Naruto had done everything asked without comment, scores himself with quiet efficiency, and said nothing, because none of it changed anything that mattered. But the class could feel the temperature in the room, the way you feel weather coming. Then Takeda told Naruto to spar Kiba in Izuka, and when Naruto had the match won in 15 seconds, not showing off, just efficient, because Kiba charged in straight lines when he was embarrassed and Naruto had known that since their second month, Takeda marked it as a loss. Review board would call that sloppy, Takeda said flatly. The room was very quiet. Naruto looked at the scoring sheet. Looked at Takeda. What was sloppy about it? Your footwork. Walk me through which part of my footwork was sloppy, Naruto said, his tone light and factually curious and carrying underneath it a complete absence of the expected deference, which was what made it so immediately uncomfortable. I don't need to justify my assessments to a student. You're recording a score that will follow me through my career, Naruto said, still pleasant. So yes, actually, you do. That was when Iruka came in, arms still bandaged, moving carefully but moving with intent. He'd heard what was happening through the wall, thin walls in the academy, and made a decision about whether he was well enough to be here, and evidently the answer was yes. He looked at the scoring sheet. Looked at Takeda. And said, with the particular quiet of a man who decided to be very controlled about something that was making him very angry, correct the score. Takeda's jaw tightened. Chunin, correct the score, Iruka said again, and there was nothing aggressive about it, just the flat weight of someone who'd made a decision and wasn't entertaining alternatives. The score was corrected. Afterward, in the hallway, Iruka caught up to Naruto and said nothing for a moment, just fell into step beside him. You didn't need me to do that, Iruka said finally. No, Naruto agreed. I did it anyway. I know. A beat. Thanks, Iruka-sensei. It was the first time Naruto had said his name that way, the honorific genuine rather than procedural, and Iruka, who understood the weight of what had just been offered, nodded and said nothing else, because nothing else needed saying. Graduation week arrived with the particular energy of something long coming finally here, and Naruto moved through it with the ease of someone who'd been ready for a year and was mostly waiting on the paperwork. The written exam was 45 minutes, he finished in 12, then sat and listened to the sounds of the village through the window because there was nothing else to do. The taijutsu portion was routine. The ninjutsu assessment, transform, clone, substitute, was where the story got interesting. He'd been walking the fine line in academy assessments for years. Not hiding his power, exactly. That would have violated something fundamental in him. But he'd learned early that doing exactly what was asked, precisely and cleanly, drew less complicated attention than doing things in ways people didn't have frameworks for. Fenraku called it calibration. Naruto called it using your audience's limits as a frame. So when the examiner said, shadow clone, Naruto made a shadow clone. 1. Perfect, solid, fully autonomous. The examiner marked it down and said, pass, and tried to keep the unease off his face, because a shadow clone, not a regular clone, a shadow clone, on a graduation level assessment was like showing up to a driving test in a race car. It was technically answering the question. It was also communicating something. Fenraku found this funny. He expressed this in the way he usually did, which was as a warm vibration behind Naruto's sternum that felt like suppressed laughter. I'm not showing off, Naruto said, internally. It's just what I know how to do. The distinction between those two things depends very much on your audience's range, Fenraku replied. The headband they gave him caught the evening light when he tied it on. Metal cool against his forehead, engraved leaf gleaming. He stood outside the academy in the dusty late afternoon sun and turned it over in his hands for a moment, not with sentimentality exactly, but with the quiet acknowledgement of a door opening. Iruka, from the steps behind him, said, "Don't make me regret this." Naruto glanced back. Iruka was trying to look stern and achieving about 40% of the way there. "Iruka-sensei," Naruto said, "you're not going to regret this." "I know," Iruka said. "That's actually what I'm worried about." The team assignments came 3 days later, posted on the academy board in the way of bureaucratic institutions everywhere, lists on paper, fates announced in dense, indifferent formatting. Naruto read his team number, read the names beside it, and was unsurprised. He'd expected the Uchiha, the village would put their most politically significant graduate beside their most strategically significant problem, because that was how the third Hokage's mind worked, balancing scales. He hadn't expected Sakura Haruno, but when he thought about it, the logic was there. Sakura was the top of the class in written exams, medically inclined even before anyone had told her what that meant, and the kind of intelligent that sometimes got buried under social anxiety until something forced it out. Good team, Naruto thought. If Sasuke could be bothered to function as part of one. Sasuke was 3 places down the board, reading the same list, and his expression, controlled, carved, revealing very little, shifted for one barely visible moment when he saw Naruto's name beside his. Something moved through the dark eyes. Not quite annoyance. Not quite interest. The look of someone who'd set their course and discovered unexpectedly that the terrain included something they hadn't mapped. He felt Naruto looking at him and turned. They regarded each other across 10 feet of crowded academy hallway, and neither of them looked away, and something that would take years to fully define was established in those few seconds, not friendship yet, not rivalry quite, but the recognition of equals by people who hadn't expected to find any. Sasuke looked away first. He didn't look away because he was conceding anything, his posture made that very clear, but because he'd seen what he needed to see and cataloging data was more useful than staring contests. Naruto let him have the last word on that one. Patience was easy when you had a 7,000-year-old wolf in your head modeling it. Sakura found them both within 5 minutes, moving through the crowd with the focused energy of someone who'd already thought through her team's dynamics and was getting ahead of the social architecture. She looked at Naruto with the direct, assessing gaze she used when she was being serious rather than performing, which he appreciated, and said, "I've heard things about you." "Most of them are wrong," Naruto said. "Which ones are right?" He liked her immediately. "I'll tell you when I know which ones you've heard." She laughed, short and genuine, surprised into it. Sasuke glanced over from where he'd been studying the window. "We meet our Jonin sensei tomorrow," Sakura said. "Do you know who?" "Kakashi Hatake," Naruto said. She blinked. "How do you know that?" "I heard the administrative staff talking about it 3 days ago." Naruto leaned against the wall. "He's going to be late. And he's going to give us some kind of test that isn't what it looks like on the surface." "That's," Sakura paused, turning this over. "How do you know the last part?" "Because that's what I'd do," Naruto said simply. Sasuke, still at the window, said without turning around, "He's right." Sakura looked at the back of Sasuke's head and then at Naruto and then back to her name on the board. "This is going to be interesting," she said, and she didn't sound distressed about it, which told Naruto she was going to be fine. The night before they met Kakashi, Naruto went to his roof. The moon was 3/4 full, enough that the village below was washed in silver rather than dark, and the shadows fell long and cold between the buildings. He sat with his knees up and his arms loose, breathing the night air, wet grass, distant cooking fires, pine from the forest, the particular clean cold of elevation, and let his mind settle. "Nervous?" Fenraku asked. "No. Something, though." Naruto thought about it. Down in the village a light was on in what he recognized as Ichiraku's, Tuchi keeping late hours, probably doing accounts. Somewhere a baby was crying, the kind of cry that was hunger and would be resolved in a few minutes. An ANBU patrol moved silently through the streets 3 blocks east, chakra signatures careful and muffled. "Ready," he said finally. "The difference is direction." Fenraku considered this. The moon moved imperceptibly toward the horizon. The silver in Naruto's eyes, always present, pulsed gently once with the deep unconscious rhythm of something vast breathing. "Then tomorrow you begin," Fenraku said. "No," Naruto said. He tilted his head back and watched a star appear in the gap between 2 clouds. "I've been beginning since I was born." He stayed on the roof until 3 in the morning, when the cold finally got persuasive, then dropped through his window and slept 4 hours and dreamed of mountains that had never had names. When he woke up, the sun was just clearing the eastern peaks, and the village smelled like morning, and somewhere across town, a boy with the Sharingan was staring at his own ceiling and thinking about power and what it cost. Naruto stretched, pulled on his orange jacket, and thought, good. The beginning, whatever Fenraku said about when it started, was going to be loud. Chapter 2, Sharpen Things. Kakashi was 47 minutes late. Naruto knew the exact number because he'd been counting, not with impatience but with the particular attention of someone building a profile. 47 minutes. Long enough to be deliberate. Short enough that it couldn't be called disrespectful to anyone who outranked a genin. Calculated lateness, which was its own kind of information. Sakura had spent the first 20 minutes in the reasonable assumption that he was simply delayed, the next 15 trying to conceal her irritation, and the last 12 reading a medical theory text she'd pulled from her bag, which was her way of refusing to let waiting be wasted time. Naruto had clocked all of this without appearing to watch her, and revised his opinion upward. Sasuke had not moved from his seat on the bench for 47 minutes. Had not spoken. Had not fidgeted. He sat with his arms crossed and his eyes forward and the dense, coiled stillness of someone who'd learned very young to wait out discomfort without showing it. Naruto understood the kind of life that taught you that particular skill and said nothing about it. The door opened. Kakashi Hatake looked like exactly what he was, a man who had seen enough to stop being surprised by most things and was reserving his energy for the things that would surprise him. One eye visible above the mask. Silver hair that defied both gravity and styling effort. The orange book half visible in his vest pocket. He scanned the room in a way that looked casual and wasn't, the eye moving with the efficiency of someone reading a situation rather than seeing it, and then his gaze landed on Naruto and stayed there for a fraction of a second longer than it did on either of the others. Naruto noticed. Fenraku noticed Naruto noticing and made a sound of quiet approval. "You're all here," Kakashi said. "Great. Let's go somewhere better than this." He took them to a training ground, number 7, assigned, which Naruto already knew from the roster, and sat on a log and looked at them with the singular patience of a man who'd done this before and had decided long ago that watching people figure things out was more interesting than telling them. "Tell me your names," he said. "Your dreams. What you like, what you hate. What you want out of this." Sakura went first, earnest and thoughtful. Sasuke went second, clipped and honest in the particular way of someone who'd stripped sentiment out of their narrative because sentiment was weight they couldn't afford. He wanted to kill a specific person. He didn't say who. He didn't need to. Naruto went last. He considered the question. Kakashi watched him consider it, the single visible eye doing something complicated. "Naruto Uzumaki," Naruto said. He sat cross-legged on the grass because the log seemed crowded and the ground was fine. "I like ramen, rooftops, and people who say what they mean. I hate being talked about like I'm not in the room." He paused. "What I want is to protect the things I decide are worth protecting. And to be strong enough that what I decide matters." Kakashi was quiet for a moment. "Not Hokage?" he asked. "Maybe eventually," Naruto said. "But that's a title." "I said what I actually want." Another pause. Kakashi's I did something unreadable. "Tomorrow morning," he said, standing. Training Ground 7. 6 a.m. Don't eat breakfast. "You're giving us a test," Sakura said. "Amimchim." "What kind?" "The kind where what it looks like and what it is aren't the same thing," Naruto said. The silence that followed had a particular texture. Kakashi looked at Naruto with an expression that was difficult to read when half of someone's face was covered, but the eye had gone very still and very focused in the way of someone recalibrating. Not alarmed. Not offended. Just recalibrating, the way a good sensor adjusts when the reading comes back different than expected. 6 a.m., Kakashi said, and left. Sasuke turned to Naruto. Not aggressively, more the way he did everything, precisely, with the minimum expenditure of anything. How did you know? He asked. Because it's what I'd do, Naruto said, same answer he'd given Sakura yesterday. He stood, brushing grass off his jacket. He's testing whether we can think past the surface of things. The bells are probably the surface. Sasuke processed this. Something moved behind the dark eyes, not admiration, because Sasuke wasn't quite there yet, but the grudging acknowledgement of useful intelligence. He filed it and said nothing more. Sakura was looking between them both with an expression that suggested she was already adapting to a version of team dynamics she hadn't entirely expected. So what do we do? She asked. I'm going to sleep, Naruto said. That's it? I've already thought it through, he said. Sleeping is just using the remaining time well. 6 a.m. arrived cold and damp, the training ground wrapped in the particular gray light of early morning before the sun cleared the tree-line. Naruto was there first. Of course he was, he'd been awake since 4, not from nerves but from the simple fact that he rarely needed more than that, and the extra hours had been spent on the roof watching the sky turn from black to the deep blue that comes just before dawn, which was his favorite color that didn't have a name. Sasuke arrived 2 minutes later, which was also unsurprising. They stood at opposite ends of the clearing for a moment and then, by some unspoken mutual decision, converged toward the middle, not together, exactly, but in the same direction, which was close enough. You actually slept? Sasuke asked. 4 hours, Naruto said. I always sleep 4 hours. That's not enough. For most people, no. Sasuke filed that too. He was developing a filing system for Naruto-related information, Naruto noticed, which he found mildly amusing and also reasonable. He was doing the same thing for Sasuke. Sakura arrived at 5:58, slightly breathless, determined not to be late, and found the two of them standing in the clearing with the particular air of people who'd been there long enough to have already established a dynamic without words. What did I miss? She asked. Nothing, they both said, simultaneously, and glanced at each other with the shared surprise of people who hadn't expected the overlap. Kakashi appeared at exactly 6 a.m., the lateness, apparently, was reserved for non-essential timing, and held up 2 bells on a string, which caught the morning light with a faint metallic chime. Simple enough, he said. Take a bell from me. Whoever doesn't get a bell by noon goes back to the academy. He looked at them with the single eye, easy and unbothered. You can use any jutsu you know. Come at me with intent to kill. Ready? Start. Sasuke moved immediately, which was what Naruto had expected. Sasuke responded to open competition with immediate forward action, it was baked into the architecture of his personality. He was also genuinely fast, faster than anything the academy had produced in years, and Naruto watched him go with the appreciation of someone recognizing a particular quality of sharpness. Kakashi stopped Sasuke's first attack with minimal effort and the air of someone taking a pleasant walk. Sasuke adjusted, regrouped, came again from a different angle. Kakashi redirected him into a tree with one hand and turned to find Naruto directly behind him. Naruto was fast. Not the practice speed of someone who trained for it, something more fundamental, the speed of something that was built into the base architecture rather than added on. He'd closed the distance between his starting position and Kakashi's back in less than a second without making sound, and Kakashi spun, and for a fraction of a second, one fraction, the Jonin's-eye widened. Naruto tagged the bells with 2 fingers and stepped back. Kakashi stood very still. He said. Both bells, Naruto said, holding them up. They clinked together softly. But I'm not keeping them. Sakura blinked from her position in the tree-line where she'd been preparing a distraction. Sasuke had frozen in the act of regrouping and was staring with an expression he was working very hard to keep neutral. That was, Kakashi started. You weren't actually at full capacity, Naruto said, matter-of-factly, dropping the bells onto the log. I could tell. The test was never about whether we could beat you, because we can't, not fully. It was about whether we'd work together instead of competing. Kakashi looked at him with that single, very focused eye. And the point of taking both bells? Kakashi asked. Sasuke and Sakura get one each, Naruto said simply. There were always only 2 bells for 3 people. The test was whether we'd realize we could solve the math differently. Kakashi was quiet for 10 full seconds. The morning birds came back into the tree line, which had gone silent during the exercise. Somewhere in the village a bell sounded the hour. You figured this out last night, Kakashi said. It wasn't a question. Most of it. Why not tell the others? Naruto thought about this honestly. Because if I'd told them the answer, they'd have been executing my plan. I wanted to see what they'd each come up with on their own. Better information. So you used the exercise to test us, Sasuke said from the side of the clearing. His voice was flat, but there was something running under it that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite admiration and was probably the particular frustration of someone who'd been outmaneuvered by someone they hadn't fully assessed yet. I used it to learn things I needed to know, Naruto said. That's not the same. Sasuke picked up one bell from the log. Looked at it. Set it back down. Give it to Sakura, he said. Then, when everyone looked at him, she was ready with a distraction that would have actually worked. She earned it. Sakura, who'd been standing very still in the tree line with the careful expression of someone processing several things at once, walked forward and picked up the bell. She looked at it for a moment and then at Sasuke. Thank you, she said. Sasuke turned away and found something in the tree line to look at. Kakashi picked up the 3rd bell from the log himself and stood looking at his 3 new genin with the expression of a man who'd done this enough times to have developed a very specific pattern and had just watched that pattern get folded, very efficiently, into something he hadn't predicted. All right, he said, finally. Don't be late tomorrow. He left. That's it? Sakura asked. We passed, Naruto said. He didn't say we passed. He didn't say anything, Naruto said, and he left us here without another word, which means we're his team and he's already moved on to thinking about what comes next. He stretched his arms above his head. If we'd failed he'd have been explaining things. Sasuke, still with his back to them, said very quietly, next time warn us. Would you have played along if I had? A pause. No. That's why I didn't. A longer pause. Then, with the measured reluctance of someone making a small but real concession, fair. The first 3 weeks with Team 7 were a study in compression. Kakashi ran them through D-rank missions with the resigned professionalism of a man who understood the necessity of the process while finding the process personally undignified. There were only so many cats a jonin of his experience could be asked to retrieve without something behind the eye going slightly flat. Naruto approached the D-rank missions with the same careful attention he'd given everything since he was 7. If you were going to do something, you did it properly, not because propriety mattered but because doing things poorly was an insult to your own time. He and Sasuke between them reduced the average mission time by about 40%, which made Kakashi look at them with an expression balanced precisely between pride and the suspicion that he was being made to look bad. Sasuke had decided, with the pragmatic efficiency that was his default mode, that Naruto was useful. This was not friendship, that would take longer and require several more near-death experiences, but it was the functional foundation of something, and Naruto accepted it on those terms. They didn't talk much outside of the work. They didn't need to. They'd developed a shorthand in 3 weeks that took most teams months, built less on familiarity than on the specific kind of precision that comes from 2 people each paying very close attention. Sakura was turning into something interesting. She'd come into the team with the academic foundations of a future medic and the social instincts of someone who'd learned to read people out of self-defense, and the combination, once she stopped performing for an audience and started operating on her actual abilities, was remarkable. She diagnosed the chakra exhaustion pattern in a mission target before the target knew they had it. She'd spotted the second ambush point in what everyone had called a routine supply escort, which turned out to be correct and saved them 20 minutes and one moderately serious fight. She was also the first person to ask Naruto, directly, about Fenraku. It happened after training, a Tuesday evening, while Sasuke was running tree-walking drills and she and Naruto were sitting with their backs against a log and their feet in the stream because it had been a hot day and cold water on tired feet was one of the underrated pleasures of summer. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You already are," Naruto said. She gave him a look that was somewhere between reproach and amusement. "The chakra you use. It's different." He waited. "I've been studying chakra biology because I want to specialize medically," she said, not defensively but in explanation, the way she always contextualized her observations to show her work. "And what you run on, I can see it sometimes, when you're really moving. It's not just larger than normal. It's architecturally different. Like a different kind of fire." She paused. "Is that the Nine Tails?" Naruto looked at the stream, watching the light break on the water. "You know what the village calls it," he said. "I know what the village calls it," she said carefully, "and I also know that the village got it wrong once already when they called the Uchiha massacre a suicide mission, so I don't use what the village says as a primary source." Fenraku made the warm thunder laugh sound, very briefly, in the back of Naruto's head. "His name is Fenraku," Naruto said. "The village thinks he's a fox. He's not." Sakura absorbed this with the focused stillness of someone storing new data. "What is he?" "He'd tell you himself," Naruto said, glancing inward with the ease of long practice, "but he says the explanation takes longer than you'd want to give it right now and he'd rather you earn the full version." Sakura blinked. "He's in there right now?" "Always," Naruto said simply. "He's not a tenant. He's not trapped. He's just," he searched for the right word. "Present. Like a partner," she said. "Like a partner," Naruto agreed. She sat with this for a while. The stream moved around their feet. On the far bank a heron stood in perfect stillness, hunting. "The silver in your eyes," she said. "Is that him too?" "Mostly me now," Naruto said. "We've been together long enough that the lines blur in places." She nodded slowly. Not afraid, not performing calm, genuinely processing, treating this information with the same clinical respect she gave everything medical and biological. It occurred to Naruto that she was probably the first person who'd asked about Fenraku as a subject of genuine curiosity rather than as something to fear or use. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "What? Carrying something that old?" Her voice was careful and honest. "Does it hurt?" Naruto was quiet for a moment. It wasn't a question he'd been asked before, and it deserved a real answer. "No," he said finally. "Sometimes it's like being in a room with someone who's read every book ever written. Occasionally it's like being 7 years old and trying to have a conversation with the concept of time itself." He paused. "But hurt?" "No. It never felt like carrying. It felt like," he thought about the roof, the full moon, the dreams of nameless mountains. "Company." Sakura said nothing for a moment. Then, "Good." The heron struck at the water and came up with nothing and rearranged its dignity and tried again. It was Kakashi who brought the C-rank mission to them, on an unremarkable morning in the 3rd week of autumn. He appeared, he always appeared rather than arrived, it was a personal stylistic choice, in their usual training ground with a mission scroll and the look of a man who'd had a conversation with the mission desk that hadn't entirely gone his way. "We have a C-rank," he said. "Escort a client from Konoha to Wave Country. Bridge builder, needs protection on the road." He looked at them with the one eye. "The road to Wave isn't completely stable politically," he added. "Bandit activity has been reported. Could turn rough." Sasuke's expression didn't change but his posture shifted fractionally, the straightening of someone who'd been waiting for something real. Sakura said, "What's the client like?" Kakashi's expression suggested the client was a specific kind of experience. Tazuna was short, broad, weathered, and appeared to have formed a very strong opinion about alcohol that had calcified into lifestyle. He arrived for the briefing smelling like sake, carrying a bag that clinked, and looked at Team 7 with the particular skepticism of someone who'd been told this was adequate protection and disagreed. "These are children," he said to Kakashi. "Genin," Kakashi said. "Small ones." "The small one on the left," Kakashi said pleasantly, gesturing at Naruto, "is probably worth more in a fight than the context you're imagining." Tazuna looked at Naruto with deep suspicion. Naruto looked back without particular expression, taking inventory: tough hands, calluses in the pattern of someone who worked with tools, not weapons, genuine fear underneath the prickliness, and the very specific smell of someone carrying a secret that had been sitting too long without air. "You're not just a bridge builder," Naruto said. Tazuna went very still. "Naruto," Kakashi said, a note of mild professional caution in his voice. "I'm not saying the rest right now," Naruto said, still watching Tazuna. "But he should know that we're going to figure it out on the road, and it'll be better for everyone if he plans to tell us the real situation before it finds us instead." Tazuna stared at him for a long moment. Something shifted in the old man's face, the front of belligerence dropped by about a fraction, revealing something tired and genuine underneath. "Fine," he said. "I'll tell you on the road." Kakashi looked at Naruto with the expression he'd been developing specifically for Naruto-related situations, which was a blend of something that might have been pride and something that was definitely the feeling of standing beside a weather event. "We leave at dawn," he said. The road to Wave ran through forest country, old-growth cedars that blocked the sky and turned daylight into green shadow, and Naruto moved through it the way he moved through everything, reading it, the way the wind came through at different densities, the way the birds dropped out of certain sections, the way the leaf litter lay undisturbed in patterns that were and weren't natural. He'd been tracking the 2 chakra signatures since the second mile. They'd picked up a tail, 2 of them, moving parallel through the trees about 60 meters east, good enough to avoid casual detection. Not good enough for Naruto, who could feel the difference between a forest making sound and a forest making the sound it made when something was trying to be quiet in it. 2, Fenraku confirmed, with the precision of someone triangulating. Moving to intercept. 100 meters to the curve in the road. Naruto didn't change his pace. He let his eyes drift left to Kakashi's position and found the Jonin already watching him, which meant Kakashi had likely felt them too and was running the same calculations. They held eye contact for half a second and reached the same conclusion without speaking. "Stay with the client," Kakashi said to Sakura, his voice carrying the tone of casual conversation that meant operational. Sasuke, who had his own instincts, had shifted his position half a step without making it visible. His hand was loose near his kunai holster. The attack came at the curve, which Naruto had called. 2 people in water prison position, experienced, operating with the easy precision of team partners who'd worked together long enough to lose the counting, dropped from the tree line with chains swinging. Naruto was already moving when the chains cleared the canopy. He moved through the gap between both attackers before either chain found its target, went low, came up behind them, and the pressure he'd shown those 3 men in Konoha 4 years ago came back online, not in a flash, not dramatically, just simply present, like a light being turned on in a room. Both attackers felt it and hesitated. Half a second. Half a second was a long time. Sasuke hit the one on the left with a precise strike that the Academy would have scored as technically excellent, which was underselling it, because the precision came from the Sharingan that had activated in the corner of Naruto's vision, the red wheels spinning up in those dark eyes with the particular intensity of someone whose ability had just found something worth recording. Naruto had the second one by the collar before the man could use the hesitation for anything productive. The fight lasted about 7 seconds. Afterward, Kakashi had the 2 ninja zip-tied to a tree. He'd produced the binding from somewhere in his vest with the efficiency of a man who understood the value of preparation, and stood examining a hitayate he'd found on the ground with an expression that had gone carefully, professionally flat. "Missed," Naruto said, reading the same symbol from where he was standing. "Yes," Kakashi said. Tazuna, from behind Sakura's protective position, made a sound. "Tell us the real situation," Naruto said, without turning around, "or the next group we meet will be better prepared than these 2 and will be having this conversation with less comfortable options." The old man deflated like a sail losing wind. Gato, he said. Shipping magnate. He controls Wave Country through economic strangulation and hired the best swordsman in the mist to make sure my bridge never gets finished. He looked at the ground. I'm sorry. I couldn't afford an A rank. I couldn't afford anything. Wave is dying. Kakashi looked at the sky with the expression of a man doing math. We should go back to Konoha, he said. Not as a statement of intent, more as the notation of what the rule book said, which was different from what he was going to do. We're not going back, Naruto said. Kakashi looked at him. You know who Gato hired, Naruto said. So do I. And turning around because the contract was misrepresented means Wave Country gets a man like Gato and a man like his hired sword and no bridge. That's not, he stopped. Restarted, more simply. We're not turning around. Sasuke said nothing. He was looking at the tree line, and his jaw was set with the look of someone who'd already made their own decision and was waiting on the logistics. Sakura had her hand on her medical kit and was calculating things Naruto could only partially read in her expression, but the conclusion she reached was visible when she looked up. I can handle field medical. Whatever we're walking into. Kakashi looked at his team for a long moment. The mist ninja were unconscious against their tree, zip-tied and useless, and the forest was doing what forests do, growing, indifferent, enormous around the small human drama being conducted in the road. Zabuza Momochi, Kakashi said finally. He's called the demon of the hidden mist. We've all heard the name, Naruto said. He's not what the name sounds like, Kakashi said carefully. He's smarter than the reputation and more dangerous than the file says. Good, Naruto said. I was worried this was going to be boring. Something moved through Kakashi's expression that would have been, on a less controlled face, the expression of someone caught between laughing and genuinely reconsidering the next several weeks of their life. Forward then, he said, and they went. The road opened into Mist Country 2 days out, the real mist, the kind that comes off cold water and never fully lifts, that sits in the valley air and turns the trees into suggestions. Naruto found he liked it. His senses didn't rely on visibility the way human sight did, and the dampened world felt almost comfortable, quieter, the extra sensory noise of a clear day stripped down, leaving only the things that mattered. Tazuna walked close to the middle of their group and told his story on the second evening, when they'd made camp and the fire was doing what fire did in Mist Country, pushing back the nearest circle of dark without quite reaching the rest. His daughter Tsunami. His grandson Inari. A village that had forgotten hope existed and was going through the motions of living with the particular exhaustion of people who'd been fighting something too large for too long. Sasuke listened without comment. Sakura's face did the thing it did when something reached past her professional composure and found the human under it. She was getting better at keeping them separate, but the story of a village slow dying had edges. Naruto ate his camp rations and looked at the fire and heard the whole story and felt something settle in him that wasn't anger and wasn't sadness and wasn't quite determination, but was something with the weight and solidity of all three compressed into purpose. The bridge, he said, when Tazuna had finished. How far to completion? 2-3 weeks of work, the old man said. If I can get there. If I can work. His hands, those thick calloused working hands, wrapped around his cup. I haven't let myself think about the if part. Thinking about it too long and it starts to look impossible. It's not impossible, Naruto said. Tazuna looked at him, the young man with the silver-lit eyes and the orange jacket who'd taken out a mist ninja in 7 seconds, and something very tired and very genuine moved through his face. You know, the old man said quietly, you're the first person who said that to me in about 3 years that I actually believed. Naruto said nothing. He poked the fire with a stick and sent a spray of embers upward into the mist where they winked out one by one, and the dark closed back around the edges of their small warm circle. Get some sleep, Kakashi told them. We'll reach the shore by tomorrow afternoon. Naruto took first watch. He sat still in the mist while his team slept and Tazuna snored intermittently and the fire ate itself down to coals, and listened to the forest and the distant water and the wind coming off the sea somewhere ahead. "You're doing that thing again," Fenraku said. "What thing?" "The thing where you decide something and it becomes very quiet inside you." Naruto watched a pair of eyes in the dark, an owl, maybe, or something smaller, catch the firelight and blink away. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," Fenraku said. He sounded, for a god who'd existed longer than most human civilizations, remarkably warm. "It's the thing I first recognized in you. When you decide, you don't doubt. You don't second-guess." A pause. "Most things that carry that quality are destructive. You're the first I've met that isn't." "You're getting sentimental in your old age," Naruto said. "I'm older than age," Fenraku said. "I'm allowed." The fire crumbled into hot red dark, and the mist moved around their camp, and Naruto sat in it without minding it, and the night ran its course and became something that wasn't quite morning yet but was headed there. Tomorrow the shore. Tomorrow wave country. Tomorrow, somewhere in the mist, the demon of the hidden mist was being paid very good money to stop an old man from building a bridge. Naruto thought about that and found, when he checked, that he was not afraid. He was not even close to afraid. He was, in the cold pre-dawn dark of the mist forest, with 3 people sleeping behind him and a god sitting warm and ancient in the back of his skull, very simply ready. The morning, when it came, was silver. Chapter 3, The Mist and the Moon. The shore of Wave Country arrived the way most dangerous things did, quietly, with beauty as cover. The water was gray-green and flat under the mist, and the boat Tazuna had arranged was a flat-bottomed fishing vessel piloted by a man who hadn't asked any questions, which suggested he'd been doing this run long enough to understand that questions were a luxury Wave Country couldn't afford. He had the look of someone who'd made peace with his fear and was now simply working around it, the way you worked around a bad knee. They crossed in silence. The mist sat on the water like something living, and visibility dropped to about 15 meters, and the mainland disappeared behind them before the opposite shore appeared ahead. For a few minutes they were in white nothing, the boat's nose pushing through water they couldn't see the bottom of, and the only sounds were the oars and the distant cry of a bird that sounded like grief. Naruto sat in the bow and watched the mist. Fenraku was very present. Full moon in 2 days, Naruto had been tracking it the way most people tracked weather, and the approach always brought the deity forward in the same way the tide rose before it crested. Not dangerously. Just more there. "He's ahead," Fenraku said. "The swordsman?" "Not yet. But his chakra has been here recently. Like smoke after a fire." Naruto looked at the water and said nothing. Behind him he could hear Sakura's breathing, controlled, deliberate, the rhythm of someone managing adrenaline. Sasuke was a complete silence, which was its own kind of loudness if you knew how to listen to it. Kakashi was reading his book, which Naruto had learned by now was not an indication that Kakashi was relaxed but rather that he was very comfortable performing relaxed, which was different. The shore materialized through the mist. Gray rocks, thin soil, a path worn between them by years of foot traffic. The boatman angled in without docking, just running the bow up on the gravel, and they climbed out into cold shallow water and the mist swallowed the boat again almost immediately. Wave Country was quiet the way places go quiet when the life has been squeezed out of them, not peaceful, but empty, the way a room feels when the person who filled it has gone. The trees were there. The birds were there. But the villages they walked through on the road to Tazuna's house had the particular stillness of people who'd learned not to make themselves visible, and the faces that appeared briefly in windows or in doorways looked at them with the expression common to people deciding whether hope was worth the risk. Naruto looked back at one woman in a doorway, maybe 40, maybe 60, the kind of age that hard living makes uncountable, and held her gaze for a moment, and she looked away first, not from fear of him but from something older and more tired than fear. He understood. He filed it. Tazuna's house stood at the end of a road that had once been maintained and wasn't anymore, backed against the water with the solid unpretentious look of something built to last by someone who understood materials. A woman came to the door before they knocked. She'd heard them coming, or seen them from the window, or both. Tsunami Tazuna was her father's daughter in the way that mattered, the same fundamental toughness under the surface, the same grief worn as ordinary expression because it had been ordinary for long enough. She looked at her father with a relief so profound it came out as scolding, and then looked at Team 7, and landed on Naruto with the particular attention people sometimes gave him, not the fear attention, not the political attention, but the attention of someone whose instincts were telling them something their brain hadn't caught up to yet. "You're staying here," she said. It wasn't a question. "If that's acceptable," Kakashi said. "It's acceptable," she said, and stepped back to let them in. The inside of the house smelled like cooking and old wood and something that might have been fresh paint on the window frames, an act of stubborn maintenance in a place where maintenance was an act of defiance. A boy appeared at the top of the stairs, dark-haired, around 8 or 9, with eyes that had learned to look at things sideways as a protective measure. Naruto looked up at him. The boy looked back, and then looked at his feet. "Inari," Tazuna called. "Come say hello." Inari came down the stairs with the reluctant obedience of a child who'd been taught that rules existed even if the world that made them had changed. He looked at Team 7 from the bottom step. His gaze moved from Kakashi to Sakura to Sasuke and stopped at Naruto with the confused expression of a kid whose threat-reading machinery was giving mixed results. "Hi," Naruto said. Inari said nothing. "You don't have to," Naruto said. Something moved in the kid's face, not quite recognition, not quite relief. He went to sit beside his grandfather and started an urgent whispered conversation about something, and Naruto turned away and let him have it. "Difficult child," Tazuna said quietly to Kakashi. "He's not difficult," Naruto said, from across the room, not looking up from the map of the region he'd found on the side table. "He's frightened. There's a difference, and it matters." Tazuna blinked. Kakashi looked at Naruto with the expression that had become habitual, that particular blend of professional admiration and the faint unsettled quality of someone who kept forgetting how old the boy was. Dinner was simple, rice and fish and root vegetables, and Tsunami served it with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to put meals together from whatever remained after paying Gato's tolls. They ate at the table, and Tazuna talked about the bridge, measurements, materials, the sections that were done and the sections that needed doing, and his voice, talking about the work, became something different from the fearful careful voice he used for everything else. Alive and technical and full of a craftsman's love for the specific dimensions of a problem. Naruto listened to all of it. Under the table, his left hand was tracing a rough map on his knee with his finger, the road to the bridge, the water approaches, the angles of sight from the shore. Fenraku was doing the same thing in parallel, from a different frame of reference. "Where would you set an ambush?" Naruto asked during a pause in the bridge talk. Tazuna blinked. Kakashi, eating, didn't look up but the book disappeared. "If you were trying to stop work on the bridge," Naruto continued, "and you wanted maximum impact, minimum cost. Where?" Tazuna knew his terrain. He said, without much hesitation, "The North Shore approach. The path between the tree cover and the scaffold is about 30 meters of open ground. And the scaffold itself, the upper sections, if you control the high ground, you'd pick off the workers from distance," Sasuke said. He'd been quiet through dinner, eating with the economy of someone who didn't regard food as social, but he'd been listening to everything. "Or go for the chief engineer." He glanced at Tazuna. "You." "Yes," Tazuna said, unhappily. "Then we don't let you be a visible target," Naruto said. He looked at Kakashi. "The workers need to keep going. If they stop, Gato wins without a fight, which is his preferred outcome." "Agreed," Kakashi said. "So we work the bridge," Naruto said. "Escort, on-site, not perimeter. Close contact protection." He looked at Sakura. "You set up a medical station that doesn't look like a medical station. Something that doesn't advertise itself." Sakura nodded, already thinking it through. "And the swordsman?" Sasuke asked. His voice was neutral, but his eyes were doing the Sharingan-adjacent thing they did before the Sharingan actually activated, a sharpening, a narrowing, the body already preparing what the eye needed. Naruto looked at Kakashi. Zabuza Momochi, Kakashi said again, for Sasuke and Sakura's benefit, was the top graduate of the Hidden Mist's Bloody Mist era. He tried to assassinate the Mizukage at age 9. He's been a mercenary since his exile, and he paused, weighing his words. Formidable isn't quite sufficient. He uses water jutsu, Naruto said. Heavy mist coverage as a combat advantage. His great cleaving sword requires 2 hands, which means his mobility is in the approach and the environment. He'd been constructing this from memory, mission files he'd read in the Hokage library, which the third had never officially told him he could access but had also never told him he couldn't. He'll want the mist. So we'll need to be ready to work blind. Sasuke looked at him. You read his file. I read a lot of files, Naruto said. When I had time, Naruto said, which was a non-answer that Sasuke's expression correctly identified as deliberate. The Hokage's archive is good if you know which sections are technically accessible. Kakashi set his chopsticks down with the care of a man making a decision about how to react to the information that his 12-year-old student had been reading S-rank mission files, and arrived at the conclusion that being alarmed about this was probably counterproductive. Get some sleep, he said, and the authority in his voice was the kind that closed a conversation. The bridge rose out of the mist the next morning like something out of a dream, not finished, not even close, but clearly something, the scaffolding and stone work already reaching across the water with the stubborn ambition of a structure that had no intention of not existing. Workers moved on it in the early light, their breath making small clouds, their tools making the particular sound of creation, the sound that carries because it's building toward something. Naruto stood on the shore and looked at it for a moment. What? Fenraku asked. Nothing, Naruto said. I just think it matters. The bridge. What it means, Naruto said. That an old man kept going even when it made him a target. That matters. He went to work. They'd split into protective positions, Kakashi close to Tazuna, Sasuke working the high scaffold angles, Sakura station set up in a tool shed at the bridge's base disguised as a supply inventory operation. Naruto moved. He didn't take a fixed position because fixed positions were useful against predictable threats and today's threat would not be predictable. The workers knew who they were, or knew something, because they got the careful courtesy that people extend to those they've decided to trust before they've had time to be sure about it. An older worker named Jichi brought tea without being asked, twice, and on the second time said gruffly, "You the ones keeping Tazuna alive?" Then, and when Naruto said yes, Jichi nodded and went back to work with the specific efficiency of someone who decided to believe in something. The mist thickened around mid-morning. Naruto felt it before he saw it, not the natural thickening of coastal morning fog as it burned off, but the deliberate spread of something directed, chakra-laced mist moving against the wind, which natural mist didn't do. He was up on the scaffold mid-level, watching the water, and he saw it come in from the north shore where the trees met the water and the sight lines closed. Here, Fenraku said. Naruto didn't shout. He whistled, one short note, the signal they'd established, and heard it acknowledged from Sasuke's position above and Kakashi's from near Tazuna. And then Zabuza Momochi walked out of the mist. He was large. Not in the exaggerated way of someone who'd been training to be large, but in the fundamental way of someone built on a different scale from baseline, the kind of size that looked correct on a battlefield and wrong everywhere else. The sword on his back, the Kobikurabocho, the severing cleaver, was ludicrous in dimensions and looked completely natural on him, which told you everything about the man. Bandages wrapping the lower half of his face. Eyes like still water, gray and deep and holding nothing visible. He looked at the bridge. Then he looked at the people on it. Then his gaze moved, methodical and professional, and found Naruto on the scaffold. He stayed there a moment. Not in the aggressive way. In the way of someone recalibrating, which was interesting because it implied that he'd had a calibration in mind and what he was looking at didn't match it. I was told this bridge had a team of genin, Zabuza said. His voice was deep and unhurried. I was told they came with a copy. That's accurate, Naruto said. I was told the genin weren't worth thinking about. That, Naruto said pleasantly, is the part that was wrong. Zabuza looked at him for another moment and made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite something else. A professional acknowledgement, maybe. You're the Nine-Tails vessel. Carrier, Naruto said. Vessel implies containment. Something shifted in Zabuza's expression, almost nothing, the kind of shift you'd miss if you weren't paying the right kind of attention. He was a man who'd built his entire operating philosophy on the understanding that power could be precisely quantified and acted on accordingly, and the information that the Nine-Tails was not, in fact, contained was the kind of data point that required a few seconds of recalculation. Interesting, he said. It's about to be more interesting than that, Kakashi said, dropping down from a higher position to land on the scaffold between Naruto and Zabuza. The copy means I doing the thing it did in serious situations, going from lazy to very still. Zabuza. Kakashi. The same register. Professional recognition. Walk away, Kakashi said. Gato won't be paying anyone anything eventually. This job isn't worth, I decide what's worth it, Zabuza said, and the Kubikurabocho came off his back with the particular weight-adjusted swing of something that size wielded correctly. That's been the arrangement since I was 9 years old. The mist thickened. The bridge disappeared at its edges. The workers had been ushered back, Sasuke had moved them without being asked, which Naruto noted as the kind of tactical awareness that didn't come from training but from something genuine, and what remained on the scaffold was a circle of fog and 3 people deciding what the next few minutes would be. Kakashi said, "Team, hold position." Naruto said, "Understood." He stayed on his level of the scaffold and watched Kakashi and Zabuza's engagement begin with the particular attention of someone who was watching and learning rather than waiting for orders. The combat between them was extraordinary, Kakashi with the Sharingan uncovered, the copied techniques coming back in real time, Zabuza with the sword and the water and the easy devastating efficiency of someone for whom combat was a native language. But Naruto was watching the mist. There, Fenraku said. There was a second chakra in the mist. Small, mobile, extraordinarily controlled, the specific stillness of a sensor type moving carefully and trying not to be felt. Not military threat level. Not even close to Zabuza's presence. But deliberate and positioned to observe, and then repositioned, and, a senbon caught Kakashi in the neck, precise and professional, from somewhere in the mist that Naruto couldn't quite fix. Kakashi fell. Sasuke shouted something. Sakura was moving. Zabuza stepped back, and the mist shifted, and in the shift Naruto saw the ghost of a figure, slight, masked, moving in the white nothing with the fluid efficiency of someone trained to be invisible. Someone else, Naruto said. Loud enough to be heard but aimed at no one visible. Very good at not being seen. But not invisible. The movement in the mist stopped. Come out, Naruto said. Simply. Without aggression, without theater. Kakashi-sensei's not dead. You used a senbon sleep point, not a kill shot. You want this to stay quiet. He paused. So do I. Come out. Nothing for 3 seconds. Then the figure stepped out of the mist. The mask came to just below the eyes, which were dark and calm and carried that particular quality of someone who'd been trained to feel very little for very long and was working to feel as little as possible right now. Slight build. Maybe Naruto's age, maybe a year older. The controlled stillness around them was extraordinary, not Sasuke's cold discipline, but something different, the stillness of someone who'd chosen to be as small as possible because it was safer that way. Haku, said Zabuza, from the other side of the bridge. Not alarmed. The tone of someone noting a fact. The masked figure, Haku, looked at Naruto. Not at the group. At Naruto specifically. How did you sense me? Haku asked. The voice was quiet and careful, gender ambiguous, calibrated to give nothing. You breathe, Naruto said. In heavy mist, breath makes condensation patterns. You've been trained to minimize them, which means your breathing is deliberate rather than natural, which means if you know what natural looks like you can find the difference. He paused. Also I could smell the blood on your senbon from 15 meters. Haku said nothing for a moment. The dark eyes moved, assessing, not with threat but with the careful attention of someone who'd also been building a profile. You're not afraid, Haku said. No. Of him? The eyes moved to Zabuza. Of anyone here, Naruto said. I don't carry fear of people. I carry attention. It's more useful. Something happened in Haku's eyes. Something very small and very quick that Naruto filed carefully. It wasn't threat response, wasn't strategy. It was the expression of someone recognizing something they'd given up expecting to find. Zabuza let them talk. Naruto noticed this. The giant swordsman was standing at the edge of the mist with his sword low, watching the exchange, and his expression, as much as you could read it, had gone to something that might have been curious, if Zabuza allowed himself curiosity. You're not going to attack me, Haku said. It was a statement not a question. No reason to, Naruto said. You put Kakashi-sensei to sleep. You could have killed him. You didn't. That wasn't mercy, Haku said, quickly, with a precision that suggested the correction mattered. That was strategy. A dead Hatake creates political complications. Maybe, Naruto said. But you still made the choice you made. He tilted his head. How old are you? Haku blinked. It was the first uncontrolled response they'd made. What? How old are you? Naruto repeated. I'm guessing 13, maybe 14. 13, Haku said, after a pause that suggested they were trying to figure out why it mattered. And you're contracted with Zabuza. I go where he goes, Haku said. That's not the same thing as contracted. Naruto nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand the shape of this, not the full shape, not yet, but the outline. A child who'd attached to the most powerful person in their world because it was the safest available option and had built a philosophy around the attachment to make it bearable. Fenraku made a sound, not the laugh rumble, something quieter and older. The sound of recognizing something. What is it? Naruto asked internally. That child, Fenraku said, is carrying something very heavy and calling it a purpose. Naruto looked at Haku and understood exactly what the deity meant. We're not finishing this today, Zabuza said from the mist edge. He said it flatly, with the tone of someone making a tactical assessment rather than retreating. This isn't what I was told it would be. Kakashi was stirring, whatever the senbon had done was time-limited, the sleep point not deep enough for long effect. Sasuke had him, one arm under the Jonin's shoulders, holding him upright and looking at the situation with those dark eyes that missed nothing. Smart, Naruto said to Zabuza, without sarcasm. You came in without full information. Better to reset. Zabuza looked at him from across the thinning mist. The gray eyes held something that wasn't quite respect and wasn't quite its opposite, more the professional interest of someone cataloging a variable they hadn't expected. The carrier, Zabuza said. When I come back, and I will come back, you understand what that means. Yes, Naruto said. It means we'll have another conversation. It means one of us dies. That's a possible outcome, Naruto said. Not the only one. Zabuza looked at him for a moment longer. Then he and Haku were gone, not dramatically, no smoke or splash, just the mist closing around them like water around a hand, and then nothing, and the bridge was just a bridge again, noisy with the sound of distant water and the workers beginning to cautiously emerge from the tool shed. Sakura was at Kakashi's side in seconds, her hands already moving in the medical assessment pattern she'd been practicing for months, fast and precise and unsentimental. Sleep point, not deep, she confirmed. He'll be fully conscious in 20 minutes. I know, Naruto said. You knew before I checked, Sasuke said. It wasn't an accusation. More the observation of someone updating their model. I could hear his heartbeat the whole time, Naruto said. It never changed. Sasuke absorbed this with the usual efficiency. The other one, Sasuke said. The masked one. You let them leave. Haku wasn't a threat today, Naruto said. They neutralized Kakashi-sensei. They put him to sleep for 20 minutes, Naruto said. In a fight where Zabuza could have killed any of us if that had been his actual objective today. He looked at the mist where they'd vanished. Zabuza was testing us. That's what today was. Sasuke was quiet for a moment. You think he wasn't trying to stop the bridge? I think he wanted to see what he was dealing with before he committed to something that might cost him more than Gato is paying. Naruto picked up a piece of scaffold railing that had been knocked loose in the fight and set it back in place with the easy strength of someone who didn't need to think about the weight. He's a professional. Professionals don't throw themselves at unknown variables. Tazuna had come forward from wherever Kakashi had positioned him during the fight and was looking at the bridge and then at Team 7 with the expression of a man who'd expected something worse. He'll come back, the old man said. Yes, Naruto agreed. And? Naruto looked at the bridge. At the way it reached across the water into the mist, stone and scaffold and the work of hands that had kept going when stopping would have been easier. And we'll be here, he said. That evening Inari sat on the front step and Naruto sat beside him, not by design but because the step was where Naruto had gone to watch the mist come in off the water, and Inari had been there first and hadn't moved. They sat in the not-quite silence of shared space for several minutes. You fought Zabuza today, Inari said finally. Not impressed, not afraid, just laying out a fact. My team did, Naruto said. I was mostly watching. Zabuza killed the last people who tried to protect us, Inari said. This was delivered with the flatness of a child who'd processed grief to the point where the edges were gone and only the fact remained. He kills everyone eventually. He hasn't met everyone yet, Naruto said. Inari looked at him sideways. That's what adults say before something bad happens to them. I'm 12, Naruto said. Inari considered this. That's not better. Naruto almost smiled. No, he agreed. But what I said is still true. He hasn't met everyone. You're not scared of him? No. Why not? Inari asked, and the question had a specific desperation underneath it, not asking for reassurance, not asking for a lesson. Asking for a mechanism, some way to understand how a person could be not afraid, because the child sitting on this step had learned fear young and thoroughly and was looking at a person who seemed to have skipped that education. Naruto thought about how to answer honestly. I have something inside me, he said, that's older than fear. Fear is what you feel when you think you might lose. I don't think about losing. I think about what I'm going to do next. He looked at the water. Fear takes energy. I'd rather spend the energy on the next thing. Inari was quiet for a long moment. My dad was brave, he said. And he died. Bravery and not being afraid are different, Naruto said gently. Brave people feel afraid and do it anyway. I'm not doing it anyway. I'm genuinely, actually not afraid. He paused. That's not better than your dad was. It's just different. Something moved in the boy's face. Not resolution, that would take longer, and the easy version of this conversation would be a lie. But something that was the beginning of a question forming where a closed door had been. What's inside you? Inari asked. Naruto glanced at him. What do you mean? You said something older than fear. What is it? The moon had come out, 3/4 now, hanging low over the water. The silver in Naruto's eyes caught it and returned it, and Inari, who'd been looking at him sideways, looked at him directly for the first time and blinked. His name is Fenraku, Naruto said. He's a wolf god. He's been alive since before your village existed, and mine, and every other village. He chose to stay with me. He felt Fenraku's warmth, present and close in the lunar approach. Having something that ancient in your corner changes your relationship with fear. Inari stared at his eyes. The silver in them was deep tonight, not aggressive, not supernatural in the terrifying sense, but undeniable, the kind of thing that made you understand the word ancient as a physical property rather than a measurement of years. Can I? Inari started. Stopped. Tried again. Can I ask him something? Naruto blinked. Then, inward, he wants to talk to you. Tell him, Fenraku said, with the particular gentleness of something vast being very careful with something small, that his father's name is still known. That the people who carry names like his carry something that outlasts the fear of the people who tried to take the name away. Naruto repeated this to Inari word for word. Inari was very still for a long moment. Then he stood up and went inside without saying anything. The door closed softly. Naruto sat alone on the step and watched the moon move across the water, and felt Fenraku settle back to his usual presence, warm, vast, present. That was kind, Naruto said. He needed a specific kind of thing, Fenraku said. It cost nothing to give it. The mist came off the water and wrapped around the house and the night settled into its full depth. Tomorrow the bridge. The day after, or the day after that, Zabuza again. The full moon in 2 days. Naruto sat with his knees up and his arms loose and watched the dark move, and thought about the shape of what was coming, and felt it not as threat but as weather, something real and large that was going to require everything, and that was fine, because everything was what he had. Chapter 4, Red Water, Silver Light. The full moon came in on the second night like a promise being kept. Naruto felt it from the moment he woke, not differently than other full moons, but more intensely, the way the same song sounds different when you know what's coming in the next verse. Fenraku was close to the surface, warm and enormous, the way the ocean feels when you're standing at the waterline with the tide coming in. Not threatening. Just present in a way that pressed against the edges of things. He ate breakfast and said nothing about it. Kakashi had recovered fully from the Senbon, Sakura had confirmed there was no residual chakra interference, clean neural reset, no long-term effect, and he'd spent the previous evening in the kind of focused quiet that meant he was building a strategy rather than resting. This morning he had the look of a man who'd reached certain conclusions. Zabuza will come today, Kakashi said. He was standing at the window looking at the mist. The water was barely visible behind it. How do you know? Sakura asked. Because I would, Kakashi said simply. If I were in his position. He tested us. He's built his picture. Waiting longer gives us time to build our own defenses, which is disadvantageous for him. He comes today while we're still settling in. He's right, Naruto said, from his position on the floor where he'd been stretching in the boneless, unconcerned way that made most observers mildly unsettled. Zabuza also knows the full moon is tonight. He doesn't know what that means for us. He'll want to close this before he has to find out. Kakashi looked at him. He'll have heard things, Naruto said, sitting up. About the Nine Tails. About what the full moon does. He's a professional. He does his research. Naruto stood and rolled his shoulders. He'll come this morning, while the mist is heavy and before the moon hits. And what does the full moon do, Kakashi said carefully, for us? Naruto looked at him levelly. Ask me again tonight and I'll show you. Tazuna had insisted on going to the bridge. They'd had the conversation 3 different ways and arrived at the same place each time. The bridge needed its engineer, the workers needed Tazuna's presence to keep working, and Tazuna, who'd spent 3 years being afraid and doing the work anyway, was not going to start hiding now. Naruto respected this so thoroughly that he'd stopped arguing after the first conversation and started planning around it. They took the road to the bridge in a formation that looked casual and wasn't, Tazuna in the center, Sakura close left, Sasuke watching the high angles, Kakashi moving in patterns that seemed relaxed and were designed to cover multiple approach vectors. Naruto walked 5 meters ahead, reading the mist. The bridge workers were already on site when they arrived, and Jichi met them at the base with the morning tea that had apparently become a ritual. "Bad morning," Jichi said, not as a complaint but as information. "The mist is wrong. My father was a fisherman. You learn the difference between weather mist and other mist. This is other mist." "I know," Naruto said. He took the tea because refusing would have been a strange response to an act of ordinary kindness, and because good tea before a fight was never the wrong choice. "Keep your people toward the south end of the bridge. Away from the water approaches." Jichi looked at him. Set down his own tea. "How bad?" "Manageable," Naruto said. "But stay south." Jichi went back to his crew, and Naruto heard the low rapid instructions being passed around, and the sound of people moving with the efficiency of those who've decided to trust a voice and act on it. He walked to the north end of the bridge and stood with his toes at the edge, looking into the mist over the water. 2 minutes, Fenraku said. Naruto rolled his neck. Cracked his knuckles, which was habit rather than necessity. Behind him he heard Sasuke's chakra spike very slightly as the Sharingan activated. The boy had learned to let it come up early rather than reactively, which was a real improvement from 3 weeks ago. 2 minutes, Naruto said aloud, loud enough for his team. He heard Sakura move to her position. Heard Kakashi settle. Heard Tazuna's heartbeat, steady and deliberate. The old man was afraid and refusing to be controlled by it, which Naruto thought was its own kind of extraordinary. The mist thickened on the north side. And Zabuza came out of it. He came out big, walking on water with the casualness of a man strolling in from next door, and behind him and to his left came Haku, the mask in place, the slight frame carrying the deep stillness that Naruto had already learned to recognize as compressed and ready rather than genuinely calm. More behind them. 4 figures in the mist, not mist Anbu, mercenaries by the chakra signature, mid-level and deployed in an encirclement pattern that was designed to prevent the workers from running. Gado's supplemental forces. Naruto looked at the mercenaries in the mist and then at Zabuza and said, "The hired hands are Gado's, not yours. Does the distinction matter?" Zabuza asked. "It means you don't trust the job parameters," Naruto said. He added extra insurance without telling you. That's what employers do when they don't trust their contractor. He held Zabuza's eyes. He's planning to not pay you. Something in Zabuza's expression moved. Just slightly. The still water eyes stayed still, but something behind them shifted with the quality of a thing already suspected being confirmed. "Interesting opening position," Zabuza said. "You lead with information instead of force." "Force is available," Naruto said pleasantly. Information seemed more useful. Zabuza pulled the Kubikurabocho from his back and rested it on his shoulder, easy and enormous, the morning light catching the notched blade. "We'll see." What happened in the next 30 seconds was several things at once. Kakashi moved toward Zabuza, and Zabuza moved toward Kakashi, and the clash of their combat started immediately and took up a 10-meter radius of the bridge with the devastation of 2 forces that understood each other operating at full capacity. Water jutsu hitting fire. The cleaver arc forcing Kakashi back. Kakashi copying and returning. The professional language of high-level shinobi violence. The 4 mercenaries came out of the mist toward the workers' end of the bridge. They found Sasuke. Sasuke had positioned himself between the mercenaries and the workers with the particular satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this shape of problem, and the Sharingan was fully up, both eyes red and spinning, and he moved through the 4 of them with an efficiency that was remarkable not because it was overpowering but because it was so precisely calibrated, enough force, exactly enough, nothing wasted. The mercenaries were experienced enough that they shouldn't have been manageable by a 12-year-old. Sasuke was not the kind of 12-year-old they'd built their experience against. Haku moved. Naruto moved faster. He cut off the angle between Haku and the main fight, not to attack, not yet, just to occupy the space, and Haku pulled up short with the fluid control of someone who trained for exactly this kind of sudden obstacle, and they faced each other with 10 feet between them and the sounds of 2 other fights happening around them. "You're not here for the workers," Naruto said. No, Haku agreed. You're here for Kakashi-sensei. Another sleep point, cleaner this time, while Zabuza has him occupied. Haku looked at him with those dark, composed eyes. You've already worked out all the angles. Most of them, Naruto said. I haven't worked out why you're doing it. I told you. I go where Zabuza goes. You said that yesterday, Naruto said. I've been thinking about it since. He watched Haku's hands, the posture was ready, the senbon holster accessible, but no one had moved yet. You're not a weapon he carries. You're a person who decided to be one. That's different. The difference is sentimental, Haku said. The difference is that weapons don't make choices, Naruto said. You make choices. You made one yesterday when you used the sleep point. You're making one right now, standing here talking to me instead of going around. Haku's jaw tightened fractionally beneath the mask. I think, Naruto said, carefully, that you're very loyal to someone who needs you, and that loyalty has become your whole structure. The thing holding everything else up. He paused. I understand that. I'm not criticizing it. I'm saying that structure doesn't actually require you to do things you don't want to do. You don't know what I want, Haku said. No, Naruto agreed. But I know what you don't want. You don't want to be the reason more people die today than have to. The mist moved. Behind them, the sound of Kakashi and Zabuza's engagement had become something larger. Zabuza had opened a water prison jutsu, the dome of compressed water that was his most dangerous containment technique, and the fight had shifted into the specific urgency of a containment situation. Haku moved. Naruto let him go 2 steps and then moved himself, and the speed differential was stark, not cruel, not showing off, just the simple physics of the gap between them. He wasn't in front of Haku this time but beside him, matching the angle, and he put a hand on Haku's shoulder, gentle but immovable, the way a mountain is gentle and immovable. Don't, Naruto said. Haku tried to break the grip. Actually tried, the technique was good, the rotation correct, the senbon coming up in a smooth practiced arc that would have found a pressure point and ended the restraint in half a second on anyone else. Naruto's grip didn't move. Not violently. Not with crushing force. Just, didn't move. The way a tree doesn't move when you push it. Haku went still. I'm not going to hurt you, Naruto said, still gentle. But I need you to not go around me. What's happening over there, the water prison, Kakashi trapped inside the compressed dome, the fight going Zabuza's direction, is going to resolve itself. I need you to trust me on that. Zabuza will kill your teacher, Haku said, and the mask was very controlled but the voice had an edge in it now, something cutting through the discipline. And then Zabuza will be hurt or killed and I will not, the voice stopped. Restarted. I need to be there. I know, Naruto said. But going there right now ends badly for everyone. He looked at Haku's eyes. Trust me. 10 seconds. Haku looked back at him. The dark eyes were doing something complicated, and Naruto watched the decision happen in them, the thing that happens in a person's face when they choose to extend credit to someone they haven't fully decided to trust yet. 10 seconds, Haku said. Naruto turned toward the water prison. Fenraku came forward. It wasn't a transformation. Not the way the old stories described tailed beast modes, no red cloak, no monstrous overlay, no violence of the process. It was more like a river finding a new level. The silver in Naruto's eyes deepened until they were fully, completely moonlit, not glowing, not supernatural in an obvious way, just the color of something very old coming entirely present. His shadow on the bridge boards was wrong in a very specific way, broader at the shoulders, with a shape at the top that suggested ears. The chakra that came off him was like the tide coming all the way in. Every person on the bridge felt it. Kakashi, inside the water prison, felt it and his single eye widened. Sasuke felt it and stopped mid-strike and turned. Zabuza felt it and went very still, the great sword dropping slightly, the instincts of a man who'd built his life on assessing threats suddenly recalibrating at speed. Naruto walked to the water prison. He put his hand against the curved water wall and pushed. The prison shattered. Not violently. Not explosively. It just ended, the way a sandcastle ends when the wave comes in, suddenly and completely and without drama. The water hit the bridge boards and scattered, and Kakashi landed in a controlled drop, and Zabuza stepped back 2 full steps, which was the first time Naruto had seen him step back from anything. That, Zabuza said, is not a genin. No, Naruto said. He was standing in the spilled water, in the rolling mist, with the full moon's approach pressing the ancient presence close to the surface, and he looked at Zabuza with the silver eyes and the expression of someone who'd arrived at the conversation they were always going to arrive at. I'm not a genin in any way that matters. I'm someone telling you that you're on the wrong side of this job. Zabuza looked at him. Really looked, the way a professional assesses a threat they've decided to take seriously. You shattered a Class A water containment with a push, Zabuza said. Yes. That takes Jonin level chakra at minimum. High Jonin. I know. You're 12. I know that too, Naruto said. Zabuza was quiet for a moment. The Kubikarabocho was still in his hand but its angle had changed, not raised, not ready, just held. What do you want? He asked. And the question was direct and genuine, stripped of the performance of the standoff, the professional asking another professional what the actual terms were. Same thing I wanted yesterday, Naruto said. For you to make a different decision. Gato isn't paying you. You already suspect that. He's using you to clear an obstacle, and when the obstacle is cleared he'll clear you, because that's how men like Gato operate and you know it. Zabuza's eyes moved. Not toward Naruto, toward Haku, who had crossed to stand near the swordsman in the 10 seconds and the aftermath, and who was watching the conversation with those composed, careful eyes. Something happened in Zabuza's face when he looked at Haku. Something private and enormous that he would never have allowed to surface in any other company, and the fact that it surfaced now meant either that he'd stopped calculating or that he'd calculated and decided it didn't matter. Even if that's true, Zabuza said, I don't leave contracts. You left the mist, Naruto said. Silence. You tried to kill the Mizukage, Naruto continued, not unkindly. You failed. You ran. You took Haku, a child you found in the street, with you, and you've been running since. A man with no code doesn't do that. A man who's replaced one contract with another, a specific, personal one, does. Zabuza looked at him with the gray eyes that held nothing visible, and behind nothing Naruto could see everything, the particular fury of a man who's been read accurately by someone he didn't expect. You're very annoying, Zabuza said. People mention that, Naruto said. Something moved in Zabuza's face. Not quite a smile. The suggestion of one, the shape without the content, the way a scar resembles the cut that made it. The bridge, Zabuza said. Why does it matter to you? Naruto thought about Tazuna's hands, calloused in the pattern of a man who loved his work. About the woman in the doorway on the road who'd looked at him and looked away. About Inari on the step in the dark, asking about something that could replace fear. Because someone decided not to stop, Naruto said. And the things people build when they decide not to stop deserve to be finished. The mist was thinning. It was late morning, the sun pushing through, and the artificial mist that Zabuza had been running was losing ground to ordinary weather, which was its own kind of metaphor if you were looking for them. Behind Zabuza, from the direction of the shore road, came the sound of boots. A lot of boots. The mercenary army that Naruto had known was coming, because men like Gato always had a second wave, and they'd been waiting offshore on boats for the signal that the ninja were finished. Zabuza heard it too. He turned and looked at the shore, and when he turned back, something in him had resolved, the way a long-held question resolves when the answer is finally just obvious. Haku, he said. I know, Haku said quietly. Get clear of the bridge. I'm not getting, Haku. The voice was large and controlled, and underneath it was everything the mask usually kept in. Get clear. This is mine. Haku looked at him with those dark eyes, and Naruto watched the same decision-making process he'd seen before, the weighing, the credit extending, and this time it was directed at Zabuza, and it had years and years of history behind it, and what it produced was not agreement but something that went past agreement into something more complete. Come back, Haku said. Zabuza looked at him for a long moment. Yeah, he said, and turned toward the shore, and walked forward with the Kobikurabocho in both hands and the mist closing around him. What followed was something that Naruto watched and filed in the category of things that reminded you that the world was more complicated than the frame it was given. Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the hidden mist, moved through Gado's mercenary army the way a storm moves through a stand of grass, not quickly in the runaway sense, but with the terrible inexorable quality of something that couldn't be argued with. The sword moved and men moved with it, and the bridge approach became a testament to why his name was what it was. Naruto watched and said nothing, because there was nothing to say, and Fenraku was quiet and present beside him like a held breath. Sasuke appeared at his shoulder. Should we? No, Naruto said. I know, Naruto said. Let him finish it. Sasuke looked at the fight and at Naruto and back at the fight, and stayed where he was. Gado himself appeared on the bridge when it was almost over, small, expensive, wearing the expression of a man whose contingencies had failed and who hadn't yet updated his assessment of what that meant for him personally. He screamed things at the mercenaries that were no longer receiving instructions from anyone who could act on them, and then he saw Zabuza, and his face did the thing faces do when they encounter something their money can't fix. Naruto was behind Gado before the man could run. Not touching him. Just there, present, the silver eyes and the ancient weight of Fenraku making the air around the small man feel suddenly very full. This is over, Naruto said. Gado opened his mouth. Wave Country, Naruto said, very quietly, is going to finish its bridge. The people here are going to stop paying tolls to you. You are going to go back to wherever you conduct your business, and you are going to find that Wave Country is closed to you, permanently and completely. He looked at the man without heat, without performance. Or I can give you to Zabuza, who has a different kind of opinion about how this ends. He watched the calculation happen in Gado's eyes. The man was many things, but he was functionally not stupid, and watched it arrive at the same destination Naruto had. Gado's boats left before noon. The aftermath was the quiet that follows a storm. The workers came back to the bridge, and Jichi directed them with the practical efficiency of a man who'd learned to slot back into normalcy as fast as possible, and the bridge tool started up again and the sounds of construction returned, which felt like the most important sound in the world for about 10 minutes. Zabuza came back from the shore. He was hurt. Not mortally, Naruto could hear the heartbeat steady and strong under the damage, but he'd taken hits that would take weeks, and the exhaustion of the fight was visible now in the way he moved, the careful management of each step. He found Haku on the bridge and stopped, and Haku looked at him with those dark calm eyes and then moved forward to help support his weight, and Zabuza allowed it. Kakashi was watching this with an expression that was doing several things at once. Naruto walked over to Zabuza and stood in front of him. You're going to need medical care, Naruto said. Your pink-haired teammate, Zabuza said, voice rougher than before but still level, is a medic. She is, Naruto said. She'll help you if I ask her to. Zabuza looked at him. Why would you ask her to? Because you cleared the bridge, Naruto said. And because Haku doesn't deserve to watch you die from something treatable. A pause. The gray eyes moved to Haku and back. You're still annoying, Zabuza said. I've heard. Sakura came over without waiting to be asked. She'd been watching, she'd reached her own conclusions, and she'd already made her decision before the conversation finished. She had her kit open and was assessing with the brisk professionalism that she wore when she'd cleared her feelings out of her hands and was letting her training run. Sit down, she said to Zabuza with the tone of someone who didn't consider his reputation an obstacle to medical instruction. Zabuza, to everyone's visible surprise and no one's complete shock, sat down. Haku crouched beside him and watched Sakura work with an attention that wasn't suspicion but pure medical interest, the careful eyes tracking the technique, the hands, the decision-making process. "You're good," Haku said. "I know," Sakura said, and then caught herself, and looked up with the slightly chagrined expression of someone who'd let their honest assessment out too quickly. "Thank you." Haku looked at the medical kit. "I have some field experience. I can tell. You used the sleep point on Kakashi-sensei perfectly. Clean, no residual interference, exact depth." Sakura tied off a bandage with efficient precision. "Where did you train?" "Self-taught," Haku said. "Mostly necessity." Sakura looked at them and Naruto watched her file this with the same clinical care she filed everything, and add it to whatever model she was building of the person beside her. Sasuke had gone to the north end of the bridge and was standing with his back to everything, looking at the water. Naruto went and stood beside him. "You okay?" Naruto said. "Fine," Sasuke said. Naruto waited. "That thing you did with the water prison," Sasuke said eventually. "The chakra that came off you." He was looking at the water, not at Naruto. "I've seen the Sharingan copy techniques from dozens of people. I've catalogued chakra signatures since I activated." A pause. "I don't have a reference point for what you are. Does that bother you?" Naruto asked. Sasuke was quiet for a moment. The water moved under the bridge, gray-green and deep, and somewhere in it a fish broke the surface and was gone. "Everything that's stronger than me bothers me," Sasuke said, with the blunt honesty of someone who decided pretending was a waste of energy. "That's been true my whole life. It's useful. It makes me push harder." He turned and looked at Naruto directly, and the Sharingan had gone back to black but the eyes still held the red's intensity. "But you're the first thing that's stronger than me that I can't see a path to catching. That's a different kind of bother." Naruto looked at him for a moment. "You're not supposed to catch me," he said. Sasuke's jaw tightened. "I'm not ahead of you on a track," Naruto said. "That's not what this is. You're the best human-scale shinobi in this generation, possibly in several. That's a real and specific thing that exists and that I can't do, because what I am isn't human-scale." He looked back at the water. "The Chidori you're going to develop, I can already see the shape of it in your chakra, the way lightning bends toward your hands. I couldn't do that. Not the way you'll do it. Our strengths don't occupy the same dimension." Sasuke was very still. "That's not me telling you to feel better about it," Naruto said. "That's me telling you the truth, because you asked me an honest question." Another long pause. "The Chidori," Sasuke said, slowly. "Ask Kakashi," Naruto said. "He has the original. You've been ready to learn it for 3 weeks." Sasuke turned and looked at Kakashi, who was sitting on a scaffold support and looking at the sky with the expression of a man who'd had an eventful morning. "He'll say yes," Naruto added. "You can't know that." "I know Kakashi-sensei," Naruto said. "He says yes to students who are ready when the right moment makes the ask feel natural. This is the right moment." Sasuke was quiet for another moment, and then walked back toward Kakashi, and Naruto heard the conversation start, the flat, precise request, Kakashi's pause, and then the answer, which was yes. He turned back to the water. "You gave him that," Fenraku said. "He would have figured it out," Naruto said. "But you gave it to him now, when he needed something," Fenraku said. "That's not strategy. Don't say friendship," Naruto said. "I wasn't going to say friendship," Fenraku said, with the warm thunder amusement. "I was going to say pack." Naruto thought about that. About Kakashi and his deliberate lateness and his one visible eye and the pride he worked very hard to not show. About Sakura and her medical hands and her honest questions. About Sasuke and his cold discipline and his genuine need for something real to push against. About an old man who'd kept building a bridge when stopping would have been easy. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe. That night the full moon rose over wave country and the bridge was lit silver beneath it, and the workers had gone home but the scaffold stood against the sky like something reaching, and the water under it was dark and the moonlight made a path across it that went all the way to the horizon. Naruto stood at the bridge's unfinished edge and looked at where it would end. Fenraku was fully present, the tide all the way in, the ancient warmth filling every available space, and for a moment the shadow Naruto cast on the bridge boards had the full shape, ears and the suggestion of tails, the great outline of something enormous wearing something small. Behind him, Haku said, "It's beautiful." He hadn't heard them coming, which meant Haku was either very good or Naruto was letting people approach without tracking them, and both were probably true in different measures. Haku stood beside him and looked at the bridge. No mask tonight. Naruto had seen the face underneath it now, and it was younger than the discipline suggested and older than the years explained, and it was looking at the half-finished bridge with an expression that was open in a way the mask never allowed. "What will you do?" Naruto asked. "After this. Go where Zabuza goes," Haku said. Then paused. Reconsidered. "I always say that." "You said I don't know what you want," Naruto said. "What do you want?" Haku looked at the water. The moonlight caught their eyes and held there. "I want Zabuza to find whatever he's actually looking for. The thing he's been looking for since the mist. He calls it strength. I think it might be something else." "It might be," Naruto agreed. "And they stopped. Tried again. I would like to learn. Properly. What Sakura is doing, the medical work. I know the basics of survival medicine. I'd like to know the rest." "That's a real thing," Naruto said. "It seems small compared to," Haku gestured at the bridge, at the night, at Naruto in general. "Nothing is small when it's what you actually want," Naruto said. "Scale is a story people tell to make other people's wants seem less important." Haku looked at him with the open expression that wasn't a mask and wasn't the discipline, that was just a 13-year-old standing in the moonlight with something they'd been carrying a long time feeling slightly less heavy. "Your wolf god," Haku said. "Fenraku. Is he here now?" "He's always here," Naruto said. "Right now he's closer to the surface." Haku looked at the bridge and the moon and then at Naruto's shadow, which in the direct moonlight was doing the thing it did, carrying the ancient outline. "What does it feel like?" they asked. Naruto thought about it honestly. "Like having the tide inside you," he said. "When it's quiet it's warm. When it comes forward he searched. Enormous. Not uncomfortable. Just larger than the usual dimensions." Haku was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you have it," they said. "Something that stays." Naruto looked at them. "The things that stay," Haku said quietly, "are the ones worth everything." The moon moved over the bridge, and the water went silver and dark in turns, and they stood there for a while without speaking, which was fine, because some things are said completely by just being where you are, with who you're with, under a moon that doesn't ask anything of you except that you keep looking up. In the morning Zabuza and Haku were gone. Sakura had expected them to be. Sasuke said nothing. Kakashi looked at the empty room and then at Naruto. "Do you know where they went?" Kakashi asked. "South," Naruto said. "Back toward the border. Zabuza's got contacts in Wind Country, I heard him mention it to Haku." He paused. "They'll be okay." "How do you know?" Naruto thought about gray eyes that had, at the end of everything, shown exactly one real thing. About a masked face looking at a half-finished bridge in the moonlight and saying the things that stay are the ones worth everything. "Because they found something to stay for," Naruto said. "People who find that are harder to kill." Kakashi looked at him with that single, complicated eye, and said nothing, which was Kakashi's version of agreeing with something completely. The bridge would be finished in 3 weeks. Tazuna would oversee every day of it, and Jichi would bring morning tea, and the workers would build with the particular energy of people who've been reminded that what they're building matters. And somewhere in the country, a village that had forgotten hope was going to wake up one morning and find it waiting on the other side of a completed bridge, solid and permanent, crossing what had felt like an uncrossable distance. Naruto ate breakfast and went to help. Chapter 5, What the Village Buried. Konoha smelled different after Wave Country. Naruto noticed it the moment they crossed the gate, the layered familiar scent of the village, wood smoke and street food and the particular mineral smell of the Hokage monument stone, but underneath all of it something he hadn't been able to identify as a child and could name now, the smell of a place that had decided what it was and stopped questioning it. Wave Country had smelled like a question. Konoha smelled like a settled answer, and after 3 weeks of the former, the latter felt both comforting and faintly suffocating. The debrief with the third Hokage took an hour. Sarutobi Hiruzen sat behind his desk in the manner of a man who had been sitting behind desks listening to reports for longer than most of the people reporting to him had been alive, and he listened to Kakashi's account with the patient attention of someone who was also reading the things Kakashi wasn't saying. His eyes moved to Naruto twice during the debrief, not suspiciously, more the way an old man looks at something he's been thinking about for a long time and is now seeing in a new configuration. When Kakashi finished, the Hokage was quiet for a moment. Zabuza Momochi, he said. Left the engagement voluntarily. Yes, Kakashi said. And the client's situation with Gato was resolved without civilian casualties. Yes. And my 12-year-old genin, the Hokage paused, selected his words with the care of a man who'd learned to be precise, dismantled a Class A water prison with direct physical force. Kakashi's I did the complicated thing. That's accurate. The third looked at Naruto. Naruto looked back, not challenging, not deferential, just present. Fenraku, the third said. He says hello, Naruto said. He says you smell like pipe tobacco and old decisions and he means that respectfully. The Hokage's expression did something that was very briefly and very genuinely amused. I've missed that, he said quietly. Not to Naruto, to himself, or to memory, or to Minato's ghost, which Naruto suspected occupied a significant portion of this office on a permanent basis. The Chunin exams are in 6 weeks, the third said, returning to professional register. I'd like Team 7 to enter. Kakashi said, they're ready. Naruto especially, the third said, with the precision of someone noting a specific fact. There are people who will be watching. People from other villages, from organizations with interests that intersect with, he stopped. Started again. There are people who will see what happened in Wave Country and draw conclusions. Let them, Naruto said. The third looked at him. If someone comes to the Chunin exams looking for me because they heard something from Wave Country, Naruto said, that's them making a choice and me responding to it. I'm not going to manage my performance to avoid making people uncomfortable. He paused. With respect. The third was quiet for a moment, and in the quiet Naruto heard the old man doing the math, the same math he'd been doing since reading Minato's notes, the calculation of how much the world could handle and when, and which truths released at which times became kindling. No, the third said finally. I don't suppose you are. He looked at Naruto with something that moved through grandfather and grief and complicated pride in a single expression. Your father said something similar. About management. Naruto said nothing. He filed the Minato reference, he always filed them, had been filing them for years, building the picture of a person he'd never met from second-hand fragments, and kept his face steady. 6 weeks, the third said, and that was the debrief. The village had its own way of processing rumors, which was quickly and with creative embellishment. By the time Team 7 had been home 3 days, the story of Wave Country had gone through at least 4 iterations, ranging from the factual to the impressionistic to one version Naruto overheard in the market that had him single-handedly fighting Zabuza on a burning bridge while the water turned to ice. I didn't fight Zabuza, he told Irika, who'd invited him for ramen on the second evening back. I know, Irika said, eating. What did you do? Talked to him, mostly, Naruto said. Irika processed this with the expression he used when Naruto said things that were more complicated than they sounded. And that worked. Better than fighting would have, Naruto said. Zabuza is good enough that a fight would have been a real fight. A real fight has outcomes that go in every direction. A conversation goes where you take it. Iruka put his chopsticks down and looked at him. You're 12, he said. People mention that. Naruto. There was something in Iruka's voice that was the particular register of the man being genuinely moved rather than performing concern, which was the version that always made Naruto pay attention. He stopped. Tried again. You came back. I was always coming back, Naruto said. I know, Iruka said. I know that about you. He picked his chopsticks back up with the resolution of a man who'd decided that the rest of the sentence wasn't going to do either of them justice. Eat your ramen. They ate their ramen. Afterward, walking home, Naruto passed the memorial stone. He didn't usually stop there. It was a place for people with names on it, and his people, both of them, weren't on this stone, their names sealed in a different kind of monument. But he stopped tonight because the light was doing something interesting to the polished surface, and because the village smelled like settled answers, and because Wave Country had put him in the way of thinking about what people built and why. Minato believed in this village, Fenraku said. I know. Kushina believed in the people, Fenraku said. The distinction mattered to her. She wasn't sure about the village. She was sure about the people. Naruto looked at the stone. The carved names were deep enough to hold shadow. Which do you believe in? I believe in you, Fenraku said, with the simple finality of something that has made up its mind completely. The rest is contingent. Naruto stayed at the stone for a few minutes, not quite praying and not quite grieving, and then went home to his apartment and his 4 hours and his dreams of mountains that didn't have names yet. The Chunin exam registration was a specific kind of bureaucratic experience. Forms, seals, fees, the institutional machinery of the village processing ambition into paperwork. Naruto completed his forms in 4 minutes and spent the rest of the time watching the other teams. The exam hall was full of genin from every major village, and the collective energy of the room was a specific flavor of performance, everyone displaying the version of themselves they wanted their competitors to see, which meant everyone looked slightly too composed or slightly too aggressive, the tells of people working to control their impression. Naruto read the room without appearing to. Sound Village, 4 teams, with a specific chakra signature in the air around them that he'd never encountered before, something that felt like the smell before lightning, dense and unstable and deliberate. He filed this. Sand Village, 3 teams, and one of them carried something enormous. Not enormous like Fenraku, nothing carried something like Fenraku, but enormous in the specific way of another contained deity, the pressure of it dense and poorly regulated, like a fire in a space too small for it. The carrier was a red-haired boy with rings under his eyes who stood slightly apart from his siblings and watched the room with the expression of someone who decided the room was full of things that could be killed. His chakra was barely leashed and his eyes were the color of sea glass, and the way he held himself was the way of someone for whom stillness was only the interval between violence. Naruto looked at him for a moment. The red-haired boy looked back. The recognition was immediate and mutual and completely unlike any human recognition. It was the resonance of one ancient thing registering another ancient thing, the frequency beneath normal perception where the deities in both boys operated, and in that frequency Fenraku and whatever was in the sand boy greeted each other in a way that had nothing to do with the children carrying them. Shikaku, Fenraku said, with the particular tone he used for the siblings. Not warmly, the relationship between the 9 was complicated in ways that millennia had not simplified, but with the acknowledgement of something that shared origin and nature. The raccoon dog, Naruto said internally. The sand deity, Fenraku corrected, mildly. Shikaku is, he paused with the delicacy of someone choosing diplomatic language. Younger in temperament than in years. The ceiling was not as gentle as ours. Naruto looked at the sand boy and understood, in the span of the look, everything relevant, a child with a deity that had never been given the option to choose, a seal that caged rather than partnered, a boy who'd grown up with something furious and uncontrolled inside him and no Fenraku to explain the difference between carrier and weapon. The rings under his eyes were from sleeplessness, not choosing 4 hours like Naruto, but unable to sleep because sleeping let Shikaku forward and no one had taught him that forward didn't have to mean dangerous. The sand boy's name was Gaara. Naruto didn't know this yet, but he would. Across the room, the Konoha teams had clustered in the familiar gravity of shared village. Naruto knew most of them by name and chakra signature and had various levels of feeling about them. Lee's chakra was extraordinary in the specific way of someone who'd removed every shortcut and built from foundations, which Naruto respected enormously. Niji Hyuga was watching the room with the confident arrogance of someone who decided their worldview was complete, which was the kind of certainty that always got tested hard. Shikamaru Nara was lying on a bench with his eyes closed and Naruto could tell from 20 feet he was running simulations. "You're doing the room thing again," Sasuke said, from beside him. "Room thing? Where you go quiet and come back knowing things." Naruto glanced at him. Sasuke was standing with his hands in his pockets, which was his version of relaxed, looking at the Sound Village teams with the specific attention he gave to potential threats. "Sound Village," Naruto said. "I saw. There's something wrong with their chakra," Naruto said. "Not weak. Wrong. The architecture. Like someone built a house and then restructured the load-bearing walls." He paused. "Someone's been modifying them." Sasuke's eyes sharpened. "Modifying? The way you'd modify a weapon," Naruto said. "To make it do a specific thing." Sasuke was quiet for a moment. "You think this is connected to something bigger?" "I think the Chunin exams are a useful cover for a large number of things that aren't the Chunin exams," Naruto said. "I think several people in this room are here for reasons that don't appear on the registration forms." He looked at Sasuke directly. "Including at least one person who isn't registered as a participant." Sasuke frowned. "That's not possible." "No one's checking chakra signatures at the door," Naruto said. "Someone with the right skills could be in this room right now wearing a different face." A pause. "You can feel that," Sasuke said. "Not a question." "I can feel the seams," Naruto said. "Transformation and disguise jutsu are very good. But they have seams where the original signature bleeds through if you know what you're looking for." "And you know what you're looking for." "I've been practicing since I was 9, Naruto said. The ANBU who used to watch my apartment thought they were invisible." Sasuke stared at him. "They weren't bad at it," Naruto said. "I could just smell the underneath." The exam proctor arrived, a Chunin named Ibiki Marina with a face that looked like it had been in arguments with reality and come out even, and the room's collective performance of composure got more genuine as the actual exam became present. Naruto took his seat. Under the desk his hands were still. Fenraku was warm and close, the quiet presence of something that had seen more than enough to not be impressed by written examinations. "Ready?" Fenraku asked. "Always," Naruto said. The written exam was designed to be impossible. Naruto understood this within 60 seconds of receiving his paper. The questions were the kind of difficult that came from being genuinely obscure, technical, specialized in ways that a 12-year-old genin had no legitimate path to knowing. The difficulty was structural, the architecture of a test designed not to measure knowledge but to measure what you did when the normal path was blocked. He read all 10 questions. Answered 6 from actual knowledge. He'd been reading widely since before the academy, and 3 of the questions touched on areas he'd studied not because they were required but because Fenraku had made offhand observations about chakra theory and sealing mechanics that had sent him to the library. He set the other 4 aside. Then he looked up and watched the room. The sound genin with the modified chakra were using it, subtle sensor-type techniques, very good, picking up information from somewhere. The Konoha-san genin were using different approaches. Sakura was working through the questions with genuine analytical skill, Sasuke had answered 8 and was sitting back, Shikamaru had his eyes closed and his pencil moving in what looked like random marks and was probably a code. And across the room, 3 seats diagonal, was the scene he'd been tracking since the registration hall. Not a student. Someone wearing a student's face, but the chakra had a texture that kept shifting underneath the technique, the effort of maintaining perfect disguise at extended range showing in almost imperceptible fluctuations, the signature underneath bleeding through at very low frequency. A frequency that most sensors wouldn't catch and that Naruto could catch because Fenraku had been teaching him to read ancient resonance since before he knew that was what it was. The signature underneath the disguise was distinctive. Medical knowledge expressed as chakra, the specific density of someone whose understanding of biology had become part of how they processed the world. Elevated sensory range. The contained coiled quality of a massive intellect that wore patience like a coat. Not a student. Not from Konoha. Orochimaru, Fenraku said. The name landed in Naruto's mind and he processed it, the file, the history, the specific gravity of what it meant, and looked at the disguised presence for 2 more seconds before returning his eyes to his paper. Fenraku's tone had been different when he said the name. Not alarmed. Not even particularly worried. More the way you'd say the name of a weather system moving toward you that you'd been expecting for a while. He's here for Sasuke, Naruto said internally. Almost certainly. He's also here to take a read on everything else, Naruto said. The exams are a collection of every village's strongest upcoming generation in one place. For someone who's been collecting things, he's shopping, Fenraku said. He's shopping, Naruto confirmed. The 10th question arrived, Ibiki's real test, the choice between taking the impossible question and risking everything or forfeiting and walking away. The room's collective anxiety spiked, palpable even to ordinary sensors, and Naruto watched it move through the genin population and watched each person decide who they were in the face of it. He put his hand up. Not to forfeit. I'll take the question, he said. Ibiki looked at him. The face with its particular history of scars looked at Naruto Uzumaki with the expression of someone recalculating. You haven't answered 4 of the first 10, Ibiki said. I know, Naruto said. But the 10th question is actually answerable. The first 10 were designed to require information that isn't available in the room, which means they were never questions at all, they were pressure. The real exam was whether we'd make the choice. He paused. I'm making the choice. Ibiki was very still. You're answering under the stakes, Ibiki said. Yes, Naruto said. Because the answer is, any information we need in the field that we don't have, we acquire from our environment. The exam's already shown me how every person in this room gathers intelligence under pressure. That's more useful than the answers to the questions I didn't know. The silence in the room had the specific quality of everyone realizing something at the same moment. Ibiki looked at him for a long moment, and what moved through the scarred face was the expression of a man who designed a labyrinth and was watching someone explain the labyrinth to him from the outside. Pass, Ibiki said. The room exhaled. From the doorway, a woman crashed through the window, Mitarashi Anko, the second exam's proctor, wrapped in a trench coat and carrying the energy of someone who decided the entrance was an important statement, and announced the forest of death, and the collective anxiety ratcheted back up, and Naruto filed the look on Orochimaru's disguised face when Anko appeared, which was the look of 2 things that had history and not all of it resolved. Training Ground 44 was called the Forest of Death for the precise reason that it was. It was also beautiful in the way that things that could kill you are beautiful, the trees enormous and old, the light filtered to near darkness, the sounds of things that had adapted to an ecosystem of constant predation. Naruto walked into it with Sasuke and Sakura and felt the forest the way he always felt forests, as a conversation you could read if you knew the language. The objective was simple on paper. 2 scrolls, heaven and earth, obtain both, reach the center tower, survive 5 days. Simple on paper. There's something here, Sakura said, within the first hour. Not asking, stating, she developed the habit of narrating her observations as they came, which made her invaluable in the field. The wildlife has a pattern. The large predators are staying in specific zones. Something scared them into territories, Sasuke said. Something's been moving through, Naruto said. Recently. The disturbance pattern is fresh. He crouched and touched the earth, the impression of something large, moving light, the disturbed leaf litter of something that knew how to minimize its sign. 2 people. Moving fast, came through maybe 4 hours ago. Other teams? Sakura asked. 1, Naruto said. The other isn't a genin. The silence that followed had the quality of a specific kind of understanding. The seams, Sasuke said. Yes, Naruto said. He stood up. He's changed the disguise. But the underneath is the same. He looked at the direction the trail went. He's moving to intercept. Intercept who? Sakura asked. Sasuke said nothing, because he already knew, and the knowing was visible in the line of his jaw. Stay close, Naruto said. Both of you. They moved through the forest with the speed that 3 weeks in Wave Country had sharpened to something real, the team spacing and communication reduced to gestures and the occasional word, and the forest translated around them, the sounds wrong in a specific section, too quiet for something that wasn't predator and too still for weather, the silence ahead of them with the quality of something waiting rather than something absent. The attack came from above. The snake was enormous, summoned, not natural, the chakra in it dense and foreign, and it came down with the vertical speed of a falling building, and Naruto had Sakura and was moving before the shadow fully registered, and Sasuke went sideways with the reflex of someone whose Sharingan had already processed the geometry, and the snake's bulk hit the earth where they'd been standing with the impact that knocked trees out of vertical. And then the person behind the snake was there. Orochimaru. He'd dropped the disguise. There was no strategic reason to keep it, they'd been found, the moment was what it was, and without it he was simply himself, which was a very specific kind of unsettling. The pale skin and the yellow eyes and the way he moved, slow and deliberate and absolutely certain of his position, the way something genuinely dangerous moves when it doesn't feel the need to hurry. He looked at them with the particular attention of a collector examining new acquisitions. His eyes moved from Sakura, noted, filed, to Sasuke, where they stayed, with an interest that was as obvious as it was wrong, and then to Naruto. And stopped. The yellow eyes held something that Naruto rarely encountered. Not the standard threat assessment. Not the political calculation. Something older, the thing that existed in people who'd been studying power for so long they'd developed an additional sense for it, and that sense had just given them information that didn't fit their existing models. Interesting, Orochimaru said. He said it the way Zabuza had said it on the bridge. But where Zabuza's interesting had been the assessment of one combatant acknowledging another, Orochimaru's interesting was the assessment of a researcher encountering an anomaly. And underneath it, very faint, was something Naruto had almost never smelled on a person who was performing confidence. Fear. Not terror. Not retreat response. The specific controlled fear of a man who'd encountered something that changed the shape of his plans and was running the new calculations while showing none of it. Naruto Uzumaki, Orochimaru said. I've read the reports from Wave Country. Most of them are wrong, Naruto said. The interesting parts are consistent across sources, Orochimaru said. A water prison demolished with direct force. Chakra output that doesn't match any known bijou hosting pattern. He tilted his head with the fluid, slightly wrong movement that was one of his telling physical characteristics. The Nine Tails is not sealed in you. Correct, Naruto said. It's not there at all, by standard detection. Also correct, Naruto said. He's not in a seal. He's not contained. He's with me. There's a difference, and it's not a small one. Orochimaru looked at him for a moment. The yellow eyes were doing something complicated. Most people, Orochimaru said carefully, would not announce that distinction to someone with my particular interests. Most people would be afraid of you, Naruto said. I'm not. Which means the usual rules of that conversation don't apply. Something moved through Orochimaru's expression, the near-nothing of a man who controlled his face expertly, but the near-nothing was still something. Naruto read it as recalibration. The same thing Zabuza had done on the bridge, but more internal, more contained, more alarmed underneath the containment. The wolf deity, Orochimaru said. I thought those stories were metaphor. The oldest shinobi texts describe the Nine Tails as a fox, Naruto said. Because the people writing the texts were working from what they could observe, and what they could observe was tails. 9 of them. They filled in the shape. He looked at Orochimaru steadily. They were wrong. A wolf god, Orochimaru said slowly, turning the concept like a stone to look at its underside. Ancient. Pre-shinobi era. The kind of being that existed before anyone thought to categorize beings. The yellow eyes sharpened. And you carry its full power. Not a portion. Not a fraction channeled through containment. The full, yes, Naruto said. The forest was very quiet around them. The summoned snake had gone still, which was interesting, because summoned creatures didn't go still unless the one who summoned them was distracted, and Orochimaru was distracted, and this was one of the rare occasions in his life where something outside his control had produced that effect. He pulled his attention to Sasuke with the visible effort of someone redirecting a river. I came for the Uchiha, he said. You came for Sasuke, Naruto said. And you're going to leave Sasuke exactly as you found him. Orochimaru looked at him. He's not yours to have, Naruto said, without heat, without aggression, just the flat simple statement of a fact. He's my teammate. What you want from him isn't something you're going to get today or any other day through this forest. You think you can stop me, Orochimaru said. The words were arranged to be a challenge, but the tone was slightly wrong. It was a genuine question wearing the costume of a challenge, and Naruto heard the difference. I think, Naruto said, that you're a man who's spent his life collecting power and converting it into himself, and you've become extraordinary at it, and you're also a man who's never been in the room with something genuinely ancient and free. He paused. You want to be. You've wanted to be since before you left Konoha. That's the real thing you're looking for, not immortality, not Sasuke's eyes. You want to touch something that exists outside human limitation. He looked at Orochimaru levelly. I understand that want. But I'm not a collection item. The silence in the forest had a new texture now. Orochimaru was very still. You're 12, he said. Flatly. The way Irika said it. The way everyone said it. Everyone says that, Naruto said. Something happened in Orochimaru's face that was almost entirely hidden and was absolutely laughter, not humor, not warmth, but the involuntary response of someone encountering a thing that is exactly what it says it is, which is rare enough in Orochimaru's experience to produce a genuine reaction. The summoned snake released, which took its enormous weight and its dense foreign chakra out of the clearing in a sweep of displaced air that shook the leaves. Orochimaru took a step back. You understand, he said, that this changes nothing about what I intend. I understand that today you've made a choice, Naruto said. I'll be here for every choice after this one too. Orochimaru looked at him for another moment. Then at Sasuke, who had not moved and had not spoken and was carrying the kind of stillness that came from someone who'd understood everything and processed none of it yet. Then back at Naruto. The Chunin exams will be interesting, Orochimaru said, and his voice had a quality that was admiration and threat and something that was almost genuine in the way that the most dangerous things sometimes become when they're surprised into honesty. He turned and moved into the forest the way he'd come, without drama, without speech, simply gone, the pale figure dissolving into the old green dark. The forest breathed again. Birds returned to the canopy. Somewhere distant, water moved over stone. Sakura let out a breath. That was Orochimaru, she said. Yes, Naruto said. He left, she said. You talked to him and he left. He made a choice, Naruto said. Same as anyone. He's a S-rank criminal, Sasuke said, from his position 3 meters away. His voice was controlled and flat, and underneath the control something was moving that had the specific character of things that take time to land. He wanted, I know what he wanted, Naruto said. Sasuke looked at him. The dark eyes were doing the filing thing, rapid and thorough, categorizing what had just happened against everything he already knew. You protected me. You're my teammate, Naruto said simply. I didn't need, Sasuke, Naruto said, not unkindly. You would have fought him. You would have fought hard. You might even have made it difficult for him. He looked at the direction Orochimaru had gone. But he wasn't after a fight. He was after your compliance, and the way he was going to get it was by making you feel like you needed what he had. That's a different kind of attack and it doesn't yield to taijutsu. He paused. So I gave him a different problem. Sasuke was quiet for a long moment. The thing you said to him, Sasuke said. About what he really wants. About touching something outside human limitation. He stopped. You actually believe that's what he wants? I know it is, Naruto said. How? Naruto thought about how to say this honestly. Because I've been what he wants since the moment I was born, and I can smell the shape of the wanting. It's the same in everyone who looks at me the way he looks at me. He met Sasuke's eyes. And the difference between Orochimaru and everyone else with that look is that he's smart enough to know he's afraid of it. Most people don't get that far. Sasuke processed this. The mark, Sakura said, from her crouched position examining the ground where the snake had been. He usually leaves a cursed mark. On the neck. He didn't get close enough, Naruto said. He could have, Sakura said, looking up. He was fast enough. He chose not to. She looked at Naruto with the direct medical gaze. Because you changed his calculation. Yes, Naruto said. Sakura stood up, brushing earth from her knees, and looked in the direction Orochimaru had gone with the expression of someone drawing a conclusion that would need several days to fully develop. He'll be back, she said. Yes, Naruto said. But not in this forest. He got what he came for. He didn't get Sasuke, Sakura said. No, Naruto agreed. He got information. About me. He tilted his head. Which means there's a calculation happening right now that I can't fully read from here. We should keep moving. They moved. The 5 days in the Forest of Death were their own kind of education. They found a second scroll on the third day, from a rain team that had made the strategic error of attacking from downwind. They reached the central tower on the fourth day and waited out the fifth, during which Naruto spent considerable time in the high branches of a cedar tree that had been growing since before any of the current Kage had been born, which gave it a perspective he found useful. The forest had things to say if you listened properly. Old growth communicated through root networks in ways that were too slow for human observation and too present for Fenraku to ignore entirely, not language, but resonance, the accumulated pressure of centuries of growth and death and regrowth laid down in layers that the deity could read the way you read sediment. This forest is older than Konoha, Fenraku said, on the fourth evening, with the tone of something pointing out a thing that should be obvious. I know, Naruto said. The village built walls around it and called it a training ground, Fenraku said. As if age submits to designation. People designate things, Naruto said. It's how they manage what they can't contain. Fenraku was in one of his philosophical moods, which came on during old growth and full moon approaches and occasionally, inexplicably, during ramen. Orochimaru. He's going to move during the finals. I know. Something large. He's been planning for too long to be satisfied with what happened today. Fenraku paused. He's also not alone in his plans. The Sound Village. The chakra modification. Someone's been building toward this moment. Konoha's leadership knows something is coming, Naruto said. The third Hokage, he's known for a while. He searched for the word. Holding space for it. Letting it develop because shutting it down too early leaves the roots intact. That's a dangerous way to garden, Fenraku said. He's a man who's been doing dangerous things for a very long time, Naruto said. I don't fully agree with his timing. But I understand his reasoning. He looked at the forest floor 30 meters below, where Sakura and Sasuke were making camp with the efficient silence of people who'd been doing it long enough to have established a system. Sasuke was doing the fire. Sakura was doing the perimeter seals she'd been developing since Wave Country, small, precise, pressure-sensitive, elegant. They've gotten better, Fenraku said. They were already good, Naruto said. They've gotten real. Is that different? Being good at training and being good at what training is for, Naruto said. Wave Country made the second thing real for them. The forest has been adding edges. He paused. Sasuke especially. He watched the dark-haired boy work with the fire, precise and controlled, and underneath the control something that had been moving since Wave Country, a quality like ice on the point of melt. He's starting to understand that the power he wants has to be for something. He hasn't said that, Fenraku said. He doesn't say things, Naruto said. He demonstrates them. In the clearing below, Sakura finished her perimeter seals and looked up at his position in the tree with the directness she developed as a reflex, the way she always checked where everyone on her team was as a matter of practice. She gave him the all-clear sign, which was one hand flat, fingers together. He gave back the same. The night settled over the forest of death and the old trees breathed around them, and somewhere something hunted something else, and the moon rose full and high and the silver in Naruto's eyes deepened to the color of the light on water. 5 days, done. The forest had given them what it gave everything that passed through it, the understanding that survival was a skill, and skills were built from the inside out. Tomorrow the tower. Tomorrow the preliminaries. Tomorrow Sasuke would fight someone with a cursed seal he hadn't received, because Naruto had changed that calculation in the forest this afternoon, and what that meant for Sasuke's arc was something Naruto thought about in the cedar branches and felt, tentatively, was good. Tomorrow the exams would become something else entirely. And somewhere in the village, a pale man with yellow eyes was running calculations. Naruto climbed down from the cedar at midnight and took his watch and let his teammates sleep, and the forest moved around him with the particular dignity of something too old to be afraid of anything young enough to have a name. He waited for morning with the patience of someone who had something very ancient helping him keep track of time, and the morning, eventually, came. Chapter 6, The Moon Remembers Everything. The preliminaries ate 3 days. They were held in the tower at the center of the forest of death, in a hall with a gallery above and an arena floor below, and the specific institutional smell of a place where important things had been decided for a long time. The surviving genin filled the gallery with the compressed energy of people who'd spent 5 days in conditions designed to break them and had not broken, which produced its own kind of atmosphere, not celebration, something more serious, the particular gravity of people who'd been tested and passed and now understood that the testing had been the easy part. Naruto watched the fights from the gallery rail with his arms folded and the quiet attention he gave to anything worth learning from. The preliminary matches were genuinely good. Lee against Neji was extraordinary in the specific way that happens when two people who've built themselves from completely different foundations collide, Lee's raw physical power against Neji's geometric certainty, the gentle fist against the absolute absence of chakra points to target. Lee lost, but the losing was instructive in ways that the winning wasn't, and Naruto watched Neji's expression during and after and filed what he found there, a young man whose certainty was the kind that needed to be right because being wrong would require dismantling something too large to easily rebuild. Sasuke fought a sound ninja who moved with the wrong architecture chakra Naruto had identified in the registration hall. The fight was technically Sasuke's, concluded in 2 minutes, and what made it significant wasn't the outcome but the way Sasuke moved, the Sharingan working at full depth, reading the modified chakras patterns before they resolved, the lightning release affinity that Kakashi had been quietly nurturing expressing itself in small crackles at Sasuke's fingertips that weren't quite a technique yet but were headed there. No cursed seal. The sound ninja had expected a different Sasuke, one who'd been marked in the forest, compromised, vulnerable to activation. The absence of the seal was its own kind of message, and Naruto watched the sound team in the gallery process the absence and recalculate with the visible urgency of people whose plan had a structural assumption that no longer held. Sakura fought a rain genin and won methodically, not with power, which she was still developing, but with the clinical precision of someone who'd spent 3 weeks doing field medicine and had developed an extremely detailed map of human structural vulnerabilities as a side effect. The Rain Genin didn't understand what was happening until it was over, which was exactly how Sakura preferred it. Naruto's match was last. His opponent was a sound genin named Dosu, compact and deliberate, with a mechanical gauntlet on his left arm that Naruto had already catalogued as a sound wave amplification device from the fight he'd watched 2 rounds earlier. The modified chakra sat in the boy like a poorly fitted prosthetic, and Naruto felt genuine compassion for it, not for the fight that was about to happen, which would be brief, but for the thing that had been done to someone young enough to have had other options. Ibiki called the match. Dosu moved immediately, activating the gauntlet with the practiced efficiency of someone whose entire combat style had been built around one weapon. The sound wave hit with the force and frequency of something designed to disrupt chakra flow and overwhelm the inner ear simultaneously, a technique that had ended 2 previous fights before the other participant had fully understood what was happening. It reached Naruto, and passed through him, and nothing happened. Not a block. Not a counter. It simply passed through and found nothing in its frequency range to disrupt because Fenraku's presence in Naruto's chakra system was architecturally unlike a human system, different foundations, different resonance, different material. Disrupting it with a sound-based technique designed for human-scale chakra was like trying to move a mountain by shouting at it. Dosu stopped. That should have worked, he said, with the flat confusion of someone whose model of the world had just produced a result it wasn't supposed to produce. I know, Naruto said. He walked forward at a pace that was comfortable rather than aggressive, and Dosu backed up the same number of steps automatically, his body doing the threat assessment before his mind caught up. I'm going to stop before you have to escalate, Naruto said. You're modified. It wasn't your choice. The thing in your arm is the real weapon and the real weapon isn't yours, it belongs to someone who built you to use it and doesn't care what it costs you. He was close now, close enough that the size differential was apparent, and Naruto was not particularly large for 12 but what came off him was. Yield, he said. Not to me. To yourself. Walk away from this fight and from the person who sent you into it. Dosu looked at him with the eyes of someone who'd been trained to be hard and was encountering something that was harder but wasn't violence, which was the specific combination that training for hardness didn't prepare you for. He was afraid. Genuinely afraid. And Naruto let him be afraid, because fear was information and not all information needed to be removed. I can't yield, Dosu said. You can, Naruto said. You're choosing not to. Those are different things. Dosu came in fast, the gauntlet swinging, and Naruto caught the arm. The gauntlet's output at contact range was catastrophic by design. The sound wave at 0 distance should have been structurally damaging, the kind of technique that didn't require accuracy because proximity was the whole mechanism. Naruto's grip didn't move. He looked at Dosu for a moment, the strained face, the sweat, the shaking of someone pushing a technique past its rated output and finding the thing holding his arm looking the way a mountain looks when you're trying to move it by shouting, and said, quietly, done. Dosu's legs gave out. Not from a strike. From the accumulated experience of having hit something that refused to acknowledge him with the completeness of something enormous and ancient, which was its own kind of overwhelming. He sat on the arena floor and looked up. Yield, the examiner called. Naruto let go of the arm and stepped back and looked at Dosu for a moment with the expression that was present rather than triumphant. Whatever they promised you, Naruto said, low enough that only Dosu heard, it's not worth what they took to pay for it. Dosu said nothing. His eyes were very still. Naruto walked back to the gallery stairs. In the gallery, the sound team was very quiet. Sasuke, at the rail, said nothing. His jaw was doing the thing it did when he was processing something and refusing to let the processing show, but his eyes tracked Naruto all the way back to his position at the rail, and what was in them wasn't the usual rivalry calculation. Something different. Something that was still being named. You could have done that in 5 seconds, Fenraku said. I know, Naruto said. The longer version was for him, Fenraku said. Dosu. He needed to see something other than an end, Naruto said. Ends are all he's been shown. Fenraku made the warm thunder sound, and Naruto looked at the arena floor where Dosu was being helped up by the medical staff, and turned away. The month between the preliminaries and the finals was the kind of time that felt like preparation but was actually transformation. Kakashi disappeared with Sasuke for daily Chidori training, which was fine. The technique was Sasuke's to develop, and the space to develop it without audience was the right conditions. Naruto trained alone and with Sakura, and their sessions had evolved into something genuinely collaborative, the two of them working across different disciplines and finding the intersections useful. Sakura was building toward medical ninjutsu in the specific way of someone who'd found their calling and was running toward it with both hands. She'd been corresponding with Tsunade's former students, the ones who were accessible, who hadn't disappeared into the Sannin's complicated orbit, and building a foundation that was already extraordinary for a genin. On the 8th day she asked Naruto to let her study his healing. He sat against a log in training ground 7 and she cut his forearm, shallow, clinical, her hand steady, and they watched together as the cut closed. Not instantly, not the dramatic cellular regeneration of a tailed beast's healing, but fast, the way something heals when the underlying system is simply very good at its job. 4 seconds for the bleeding to stop. 40 for the wound to close completely, leaving nothing behind, not even a line. Sakura studied this with the focused attention she gave to things that genuinely interested her. The cell regeneration is faster than standard, she said, but the mechanism isn't the same as Bijou-accelerated healing I've read about. It's not chakra being pumped into damaged tissue from outside. It's like the tissue itself knows what it's supposed to be and returns to it. That's how Fenraku described it, Naruto said. Memory of form. Memory of form, she repeated, testing the phrase. That's not in any medical literature I've read. Pre-shinobi era biology, Naruto said. Most of the relevant material wasn't written down. Or was written down and sealed. Sakura looked at him. Can I access those seals? Some of them, Naruto said. The third Hokage has been more generous with the archive since Wave Country. I'll introduce you formally. Sakura's expression did the thing it did when something went from interesting to genuinely exciting and she was trying not to show how much it meant. She nodded with professional composure and then looked back at his healed arm and touched the skin where the cut had been, not looking for anything, just acknowledging the reality of it. Does it always work? She asked. Yes, Naruto said. As long as there's enough left to remember. She thought about what that meant, and what it implied about the limits of memory of form, and Naruto watched her think it through and reach the right conclusion and set it aside for later consideration, which was the right thing to do with information that had emotional weight but no immediate application. You're going to be extraordinary, Naruto said. Sakura looked at him with the direct gaze. I know, she said. I just need time. You have it, Naruto said. She looked at him for a moment longer, and then closed her medical kit with the snap of someone putting a chapter away cleanly, and stood up. Same time tomorrow. Same time tomorrow, Naruto said. He was on the roof on the 16th night when he felt the first tremor. Not seismic, chakra. A specific kind of chakra movement that had the texture of something being activated in multiple locations simultaneously, the signature of a large coordinated technique rather than individual usage. He'd felt this pattern described in mission files but never live. He was downstairs, dressed, and out the door in 45 seconds. The village was quiet. Too late for foot traffic, too early for the market to wake up. The moon was 3/4 full, close enough that Fenraku was forward and the silver was deep in his vision, and the chakra signatures of Konoha moved around him in the familiar map he'd been building since he was 8, ANBU positions, patrol routes, the specific signatures of the Jonin who were always somewhere in the village's protective orbit. One of those signatures was wrong. Earth barrier technique, Fenraku said. The activation point is in the earth under the exam arena. Someone's been preparing this for weeks, maybe months. Naruto moved. He found Kakashi coming from the opposite direction, moving fast, the Jonin's expression doing the thing it did in serious situations, entirely still, all the performance stripped out. You felt it, Kakashi said. Chakra activation under the arena, Naruto said. Multiple points. This has been set up in advance. I know, Kakashi said. The earth barrier is designed to seal the arena. Separate the Hokage from outside support. He was moving as he talked, and Naruto matched his pace. This is what Orochimaru's been building toward. The Sound and Sand villages, Naruto said. Coordinated invasion, Kakashi confirmed. We've had intelligence suggesting it was coming but not the timing. He looked at Naruto with the one eye. The third Hokage is going to be in that arena. Naruto was already running. He hit the arena entrance at speed, past the Chunin guards who were just beginning to understand that something was wrong, through the tunnels and into the arena floor as the sounds of the village changed overhead, not the ordinary sounds of the finals day beginning, something else layered underneath it, the sound of a coordinated plan coming online all at once. The Hokage's box was above the arena floor. The third was there. Naruto could see the old man from below, in his formal hat and his robes, watching the morning preparations with the particular stillness of someone who'd already understood something and was waiting for it to fully arrive. And beside the third, wearing the Kazekage's robes and the Kazekage's hat, was a shape that smelled wrong. Naruto stopped in the middle of the arena floor. He looked up at the Kazekage-shaped thing beside the third Hokage, and Fenraku identified it in the same instant Naruto did, the ancient deity reading the chakra signature the way you read a page, the structure beneath the robes, the density of the presence, the particular controlled wrongness of something that was wearing a face it had borrowed. Orochimaru. Not a censor technique, not a guess. The smell was unmistakable now, the distinctive layered signature of the Sannin who'd been in this village before and left traces in its chakra memory that Naruto had learned to identify months ago. He's been beside the Hokage all morning, Fenraku said. Clear the arena, Naruto said. Loud, cutting across the noise of the early crowd. He was standing in the center of the arena floor looking up at the Hokage's box and his voice had the quality it got when Fenraku was forward, large, carrying the specific resonance of something ancient that projected without effort. Everyone in the immediate area stopped. The third Hokage looked down. Their eyes met. And the old man smiled, not pleasantly, not with humor, but with the specific expression of someone who'd been waiting a very long time for the rest of the world to catch up with something he'd known, and the relief of it registering in the lines of his face. Orochimaru moved. He shed the Kazekage's appearance the way you shed a coat, and the pale face and the yellow eyes and the smile that was the wrong shape for a human smile were simply there, no transition, and the killing intent that came off him was genuine and considerable, filling the box with the pressure of something that had decided the moment for performance was over. The third Hokage's response was immediate and complete. The adamantine staff appeared in his hands, the Monkey King Enma already summoned, the transformation complete, and the Hokage who had fought wars and killed in every generation of Konoha's history and outlasted every mistake including his own was simply present, fully and without reservation. Naruto was at the box in 3 seconds. He came over the railing from below in a movement that drew shouts from the surrounding crowd and landed on the box railing with the lightness that was never quite human, and looked at Orochimaru across the 10 feet of a space that suddenly felt like a different kind of arena. Orochimaru looked at him. The yellow eyes were doing the thing they'd done in the forest, the recalibration, the fear running very far under the surface, the genuine calculation of a man who'd encountered his variable again. You, Orochimaru said, and the word held several things. The third Hokage is not yours, Naruto said. He was on the railing, balanced, the full moon's proximity making Fenraku enormous and present, the silver so deep in his eyes they were nearly white. Whatever you're building toward tonight, the invasion, the sound and sand coordination, all of it, you're going to have to build it against me. You're one child, Orochimaru said. I'm one child carrying something older than this village's foundations, Naruto said. And I'm standing between you and an old man you're not going to touch. The third Hokage said, Naruto. Naruto didn't look away from Orochimaru. Sensei. The third was quiet for a moment. You should step back. No, Naruto said. A pause. I see, the third said, and what was in his voice was too layered to fully read, but the word see carried the weight of a man looking at something that had been described to him and finally seeing it whole. Around the arena, the invasion was beginning. The sounds from outside the walls were changing, the specific noise of coordinated attack, of gates being tested, of the response patterns activating. Sand Village genin in the crowd were moving. Sound forces entering from the tunnel approaches. The systematic, patient work of months of planning coming online. Orochimaru said, the invasion doesn't need me to handle this personally. It's already in motion. I know, Naruto said. But you're here. And while you're here you're not coordinating. Every second you spend with me is a second the defense has to get organized. He smiled, easy and genuine. So here we are. Orochimaru looked at him for a long moment, and the yellow eyes held something that was neither what Naruto had expected nor what the Sannin had probably planned to show. Genuine respect, the kind that existed in people who understood what they were looking at, mixed with genuine frustration, the kind that came from having the most carefully laid plan meet a variable that refused to behave like a variable. You planned this, Orochimaru said. The positioning. The timing. You've been planning this since the forest. Since the registration hall, actually, Naruto said. The Sannin's expression did something complicated. What followed was not a clean battle in the way battle stories usually ran. It was three things at once, Orochimaru and the third moving into their own confrontation with the weight and devastation of two forces at the absolute apex of their respective powers, the jutsu exchanged between them on a scale that redrew the physical geography of the Hokage's box and the section of arena around it, the invasion moving through the village in the coordinated multivector way of something planned carefully, and Naruto moving through all of it. He couldn't fight Orochimaru directly while the third was engaged. Breaking that engagement was disrupting the third's ability to control the field, and the third's control of the engagement was the thing keeping Orochimaru from going wider. So Naruto did what he'd been doing since the registration hall, he held ground and created problems. The sound forces in the arena tunnel, he moved through them like weather, the Fenraku presence fully forward now, the silver eyes in the dark of the tunnel making the same impression they'd made on those three men in Konoha years ago, the impression of the ocean when you're standing at the waterline and realize the tide has decided to come all the way in. He didn't kill any of them. He didn't need to, the pressure alone was enough in close quarters, the ancient weight of Fenraku filling the tunnel space and finding nothing in the sound ninja's conditioning that had prepared them for what they were sensing. They ran. Not all of them. Some were committed enough, or afraid enough of the people behind them, to hold their position. Those ones he dealt with directly, quickly, with the clean efficiency of someone who'd learned to end fights in the time it took the other person to understand a fight was happening. Then back to the surface. The arena was chaos in the specific way of a plan executing while encountering resistance, not random violence but coordinated activity colliding with the defensive response, which produced the complex moving geometry of a battle that had a structure if you could see high enough to read it. Gaara was in the arena. He'd been fighting already, the sand was everywhere, the desert presence of Shikaku pressing through the containment of the poor seal, and the red-haired boy was standing in a ring of crushed stone with his arms out and his eyes doing something that was neither fully his nor fully Shikaku's but somewhere unstable in between. His opponent, it had been Lee, who was now down, who Naruto clocked as breathing and injured but alive, had stopped being the point. The seal was the point. The stress of the fight had pushed Shikaku forward and the poorly fitted containment was flexing and the boy who lived inside it was somewhere between present and lost. Naruto dropped from the upper level directly in front of him. Gaara's eyes, the sea glass green, the rings underneath, focused on him with the immediacy of something locating a priority target. The sand rose. Hey, Naruto said. The sand kept rising. The Shikaku pressure was immense, poorly regulated, the quality of something in pain rather than something in control. Hey, Naruto said again. Louder, not aggressive, the specific tone of someone trying to reach through interference. Gaara. The sand stopped. It didn't lower. It stayed where it was, massive and ready, but it stopped moving, which was its own kind of response. Gaara's eyes were on his, and Naruto looked back and let Fenraku come fully forward, not as threat display, not as power contest, but as recognition. The resonance that had happened in the registration hall happening again but closer, more direct, the frequency beneath normal perception where the deities operated, and at that frequency Fenraku reached toward Shikaku with the patience of something enormously old and enormously calm, and Shikaku, furious, poorly housed, in pain, felt the reach and went very still the way a frightened animal goes still when something it recognizes as kin comes close. Gaara blinked. He was more present than he'd been 30 seconds ago. Not safe, the seal was still what it was, the conditions of his life were still what they were, but present, here, looking at Naruto with the sea glass eyes and the rings underneath, and the look was the most human thing Naruto had seen from him. "You're real," Gaara said. Flatly. With the quality of someone who'd stopped believing in things and was currently encountering evidence that required them to reconsider. "Yes," Naruto said. "Your deity," Gaara said, "is with you." "Yes," Naruto said. "Fenraku says Shikaku is heard." Something cracked open in Gaara's face. Not dramatically. Not with tears or sound. Just, a line appeared in the absolute stone of the expression that had been built by a life of weaponized isolation, and through the line came something that was the ghost of the thing it had been before that life had happened. "Shikaku is," he stopped. The sand lowered. "Heard," he repeated, with the specific quality of someone saying a word they've known the definition of but never felt the meaning. "The invasion," Naruto said quietly. "Your village triggered it. The plan is Orochimaru's but the sand provided the army." He held Gaara's eyes. "You don't have to be part of what comes next. You have a choice." "The sand has already made choices," Naruto said. "You can make different ones." Gaara looked at him for a long moment. The arena around them was still in the specific way of a storm's eye, chaos operating at their periphery and this small circle of conversation holding its own weather. "I've never," Gaara started, and stopped, and the stopping held everything that had been done to him and everything that had been made out of what was done to him. "I know," Naruto said. "But that was before. This is now." Something settled in Gaara's expression. Not peace, peace was too far, too large a distance to cover in one conversation in the middle of a ruined arena. But something that was the precondition for peace, the ground clearing before the seed, the moment of decision before the decision is made. He looked at the arena. At the battle. At Temari and Kankuro, his siblings, somewhere in the chaos making their own choices. "I don't know how to stop," he said. Very quietly. "Start with where you're standing," Naruto said. "Right here. Nothing moves that you don't want to move." The sand settled. All of it, the massive amount of it, the swirling presence that Shikaku had been building since the fight began, came down in a slow dispersal that moved out from Gaara's feet like a tide going out, and the air in that corner of the arena cleared, and Gaara stood in the absence of what he'd been doing with the careful stillness of someone learning what standing still actually meant. Naruto looked at him for one more moment, then turned back to the arena. The third Hokage's battle with Orochimaru moved. It moved through the Hokage's box and through the arena wall and into the section of roof between the arena and the first inner wall, and the jutsu they exchanged there were large enough that the shockwave reached the street 2 blocks east and buckled a retaining wall. Naruto felt it from below and tracked the movement and was moving before the second shockwave hit. Kakashi was already coordinating the Jonin response in the streets. Naruto could hear the orders from 2 blocks away, the crisp decisive voice that Kakashi used when all the performance was stripped off and what remained was the man who'd graduated Jonin at 13. Sasuke was somewhere close, the Sharingan's distinctive chakra output moving fast in the direction of a sound team that had taken a civilian street. Sakura was in the triage position she'd set up before the finals even started, because she'd read the same signs Naruto had read and prepared a different way. He went up. The rooftop between the arena and the wall was where the third was making his stand, and Naruto came over the lip of the arena roof and saw it, the scope of a fight between two people who'd been building toward this confrontation for 30 years. The third had called Enma, the Monkey King's diamond-hard staff moving in a defense grid that covered angles Naruto couldn't have calculated, and Orochimaru was, something else, the body moving with the wrongness that came from modifications that had been going on for years, the snake nature fully expressed, the pale hands calling techniques from a dozen different origins. The third was winning. Barely. The way you barely win something that's also trying to take your life. Naruto didn't enter the fight. He positioned himself at the edge of the rooftop and became the wall, the thing that stopped any external variable from entering the third's fight, the interference that couldn't be anticipated because he hadn't been in Orochimaru's plan at this stage. Two sound jonin who'd been moving to flank the third's position found Naruto instead. Dealt with. A summoning technique that had been coming off the arena wall, a large snake aimed at the third's right side, Naruto cut it off at the summoning point, broke the technique at its source, and the snake dispersed into smoke. Orochimaru saw this. He saw it between exchanges with the third, the yellow eyes cutting to Naruto's position with the specific quality of someone whose plan had a persistent gap in it that kept producing the same obstacle. "You're everywhere," Orochimaru said, not directing it at anyone. "Not everywhere," Naruto said. "Just the places that matter." The third pressed the opening, that half-second of Orochimaru's attention being divided, and the technique he unleashed was something Naruto had never seen live, only read about in the sealed archive. The dead demon consuming seal. The same technique Minato had used, and the weight of the recognition hit Naruto like cold water, because the seal required a cost that the third had already decided to pay. "No," Naruto said. The third heard him. Glanced over, and the old eyes held something that was simultaneously apology and explanation and the particular decision face of a man who'd made up his mind. "Don't," Naruto said. He was moving. "There's another way." "I can, Naruto," the third said, and his voice was completely calm, the way the voices of people who've accepted something are calm. "Some fights end the way they end. This one doesn't have to," Naruto said. He was close now, close enough that the seal's formation was visible in the air between the third and Orochimaru, the death god silhouette already present at its edges. "Give me the angle." "I can, the seal is the right answer," the third said. "It removes the immediate threat to the village. The invasion collapses without Orochimaru's coordination." "I can remove the threat," Naruto said. "Not without costs you shouldn't bear yet," the third said. "And then, quietly, you have time, Naruto." "I don't." Orochimaru had not moved. He was watching this exchange with the expression of someone watching a phenomenon they hadn't predicted and couldn't classify, the yellow eyes going between the old man and the boy, and in the space where his usual manipulation would operate there was something that was almost paralysis, because the thing he was watching, an old man choosing to die for a village he loved and a boy trying to find another way, was outside the logic system he operated in. Fenraku said, in the quietest voice the deity had ever used with Naruto, "He's right about the time." "There's always another way," Naruto said. "Yes," Fenraku said. "But sometimes the right way is someone else's to choose." Naruto stopped. The third looked at him, and the old eyes were clear and present and something else that Naruto felt rather than named, the specific look of someone seeing something they hoped they'd see before the end, and seeing it. Live loudly, the third said, and completed the seal. The death god took what it came for. Orochimaru lost his arms. Not to violence, to the seal, the technique pulling the Snake Lord's most vital capability away from him with the irreversibility of something that operated at a level deeper than chakra. The scream that came from him was not the scream of pain but of something more fundamental, loss, the first real loss he'd encountered in 30 years of acquiring and never giving up. He was gone in the next second. Not dramatically, the coordination of his movements broken, the invasion losing its center with his exit, the sound forces receiving the signal of a plan that had just lost its axis. The third Hokage sat down. Naruto was there. He sat beside him on the broken rooftop in the gray morning light, and the old man leaned slightly, just slightly, against the young shoulder beside him, and the village moved and breathed and fought and lived around them. Your father would have been, the third started. I know, Naruto said quietly. The silence that followed was complete and full and had no need for anything added to it. The aftermath of the invasion ran for 3 days. The Sand forces withdrew when Gaara, standing at the eastern gate with his siblings, made the decision that came down to him in the arena when something ancient and free had told him he was heard. The withdrawal was not defeat, it was the withdrawal of forces whose commander had changed his objectives, which was different and would be debated in Sand political circles for months. Konoha buried its dead and repaired its walls and did the things cities do when they've been hit and held, the counting, the mourning, the taking of stock that follows surviving. The third Hokage was interred with the ceremonies appropriate to a man who'd led the village through 3 generations of difficulty and chosen, at the final moment, to spend himself entirely rather than leave the cost to someone else. The whole village came. Naruto stood in the crowd and said nothing, because what he felt was too large for words and didn't need them anyway. Sasuke found him afterward, on the memorial stone, which was becoming a place where things happened between them that happened nowhere else. The arms, Sasuke said. Orochimaru's. The seal took them, Naruto said. He'll find another way, Sasuke said. To get what he wants. Yes, Naruto said. Sasuke was quiet for a moment. The cursed seal, he said. In the forest. You prevented it. Yes. He'll come back for that too, Sasuke said. He's going to keep coming back until, he stopped. The jaw was doing the thing, the cold control managing something very warm underneath it. What do I do, he said. Flatly. With the honesty of someone who'd stripped all the performance off. When someone's decided you're the thing they're going to have. Naruto looked at the stone. The carved names in the evening light. You keep being worth more than their plan for you, he said. Every day. In every choice. You make yourself into something their plan can't account for. He paused. You're already doing it. You just don't see it from the inside. Sasuke looked at the stone. The Chidori, Naruto said. Is it ready? Almost, Sasuke said. When it's ready, Naruto said, it'll be yours. Not a borrowed technique. Not what Kakashi-sensei used, not what the mission files describe. What you make it. He looked at Sasuke. That's what he can't have. The thing you make. Sasuke was quiet for a long time. The evening birds came and went. The village settled into night around them. Naruto, Sasuke said. Yeah. In the arena. With Gaara. A pause. I watched that. The sand going down. The way he listened to you. He stopped again, the words coming with the specific difficulty of things Sasuke only said when he decided they needed to be said. I don't know what you are. I said that in Wave Country. I still don't know. But I know what you do with it. He looked away. That matters. Naruto said nothing for a moment. That's the nicest thing you've said to me, he said. Sasuke's expression did something very brief and very real. Don't push it. Naruto almost laughed. He let it go. They stood at the stone as the dark came fully in, and the village lit its lights one by one, and the memorial caught and held them, the names gleaming, the weight of what they meant manageable from here, in the evening, beside someone who understood the weight. Sakura found him at Ichiraku's the next morning. She sat down beside him and ordered tea and was quiet for long enough that Tucci, reading the room with the expertise of a man who'd been listening to people at his counter for decades, moved to the far end and found things to do. I have a question, she said. Ask. She looked at her tea. In the arena. With Gaara. She paused. What did you say to him? That he was heard, Naruto said. That Fenraku heard Shikaku. Sakura turned this over. And that was enough? It wasn't enough for everything, Naruto said. He's still carrying a seal that wasn't designed to work with him. He still has a village that used him as a weapon. That doesn't fix in one conversation. He drank his tea. But I gave him a moment where something was different than it had always been. Sometimes that's the first thing. Sakura looked at him for a moment. You do that a lot, she said. Give people the first thing. Naruto blinked. Inari on the step in Wave Country, she said. Haku on the bridge in the moonlight. Dosu in the arena. Me, in that first week of the academy when you said my question was a good one and meant it. She looked at her tea. You find the thing that needs to be said first and you say it. Naruto said nothing for a moment. Fenraku says it's because I was raised without the things I needed, he said finally. So I got good at identifying them in other people. Sakura was quiet. He says that kindly, Naruto added. It doesn't bother me. I know it doesn't, she said. She looked up, and her eyes were clear and direct and held everything she'd grown into over 3 weeks of Wave Country and 1 month of exam preparation and 3 days of aftermath. I'm glad you're on my team. Naruto looked at her. Then out at the early morning market, waking up around them, the village doing what it always did, existing, carrying on, building the ordinary life that made the extraordinary worth fighting for. Yeah, he said. Me too. Tucci appeared at their end of the counter and refilled the tea without asking, because that was what Tucci did, and the morning settled around them, warm and ordinary and full. Naruto went to the roof that night. The moon was full. It came up over the eastern forest and crossed the sky above Konoha in the slow arc that it had been making above this land since before the land had a name, and the village below went silver in its light, and the Hokage monument looked down on the rooftops and the streets and the small warm windows of people going about the business of their lives. He sat with his knees up and his arms loose and let Fenraku come fully forward, all the way, the tide completely in, the ancient presence filling every available space and then occupying the edges as well, and the shadow he cast on the roof was the full shape, ears, the great outline, the 9 tails of silver-white light fanning out behind the shadow of a boy sitting on a rooftop in a village that had once called him a monster. The third, Fenraku said. I know, Naruto said. You couldn't have stopped it. I know. You tried, Fenraku said. That's the thing that matters. Not the outcome. The fact that there was someone who tried. Naruto looked at the moon and felt the warmth of the presence inside him and thought about an old man leaning slightly against a young shoulder on a broken rooftop in the gray morning. Fenraku, he said. Yes. The world is going to keep putting things in front of me, Naruto said. Orochimaru. Whatever comes after Orochimaru. The things that were buried in this village that are going to come up now that the Hokage is gone. He paused. It's going to keep escalating. Yes, Fenraku said. That's what happens when something genuinely free exists in a world that runs on control. The world tries to solve for you. I'm not afraid of it, Naruto said. I know, Fenraku said. You've never been afraid of anything. But I want them with me, Naruto said. Sasuke and Sakura and Kakashi-sensei. I want them with me for all of it. Not because I need them to survive it. Because, he stopped. Looked at the village below, the lights in the windows, the ordinary life of people who didn't know how many things were moving in the dark above their ordinary lives. Because the things worth protecting are worth protecting together. Fenraku was quiet for a moment. That, the deity said, is what I was waiting to hear you say. You could have asked, Naruto said. I could have, Fenraku said, warm and vast and entirely present. But you needed to arrive at it yourself. That's how it works with the things that actually matter. The moon moved across the sky above Konoha. The village breathed below. And on the rooftop, in the silver light, the boy who had been born at the intersection of a father's love and a god's choice sat with something ancient and chose, deliberately and completely, to be both things he was, the human child who wanted ramen and teammates and a village worth believing in, and the carrier of something so old it remembered the world before names, so powerful that the ocean was a reasonable comparison, so free that the world would keep trying to solve for it and keep finding that freedom didn't solve. He was 12 years old and he was 7,000 years old, and the moon looked at both of these things and found them exactly right. Naruto looked at the village, and the village didn't know it was being looked at with that specific quality of attention, the attention of someone who decided. Below, in their various apartments and houses, 3 people slept: a boy who carried lightning in his hands and grief in his bones, a girl who could read the body's memory of itself, a man who read an orange book and hid an extraordinary heart behind deliberate lateness. His pack. He'd used the word. He'd decided. Tomorrow, Fenraku said. Tomorrow, Naruto agreed. The moon finished its arc. The stars behind it were uncountable. The boy on the rooftop sat in the silver dark and was not afraid of anything, and the village below him was alive, and the things buried in it were going to come up, and when they did, there was going to be someone there who'd already decided what he was going to do about them. He stayed until the moon set and the east began to go pale, and then he dropped back through his window and slept his 4 hours and dreamed, not of mountains without names, but of a bridge crossing water in the mist, completed, solid, permanent, reaching from one side to the other with the particular dignity of a thing that was built when building it was hard. When he woke, the sun was clearing the peaks. He pulled on his orange jacket. He went out into the day.